Hello, London Marie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, thanks for being here. My name is Gene. I'm the person who sets up.
Good. Thank you.
I'm just going to read the pledge. It's really small.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't-
Yeah. Just like this. It's like that. voicemail that.
Part of my. Okay, we are going to get this meeting started, please. We can take our seats. Thank you. All right, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the October 15th, 2024 TUSD Governing Board meeting. May I get a roll call, Ms. Popoa?
Ms. Shaw?
Here.
Ms. Ekstrom?
Here.
Mr. Romero?
Here.
Dr. Ravi?
Here.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Here. Okay, all 5 of us are here. Great. And before we get into the Pledge of Allegiance, I hope everybody had a wonderful fall break. And for those who didn't, weren't able to enjoy any break time, I hope that happens for you soon. I would also like to acknowledge that yesterday was Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm a big fan of Indigenous Peoples Day because I personally do not believe it should have been Columbus Day in the first place. So thank you there. 2 other items. Today is Global Hand Washing Day. So, and I'm sure Dr. Shaw likes to tell all his patients to wash their hands 15 seconds, sing happy birthday or whatever your favorite song is. Because if you don't wash your hands, it makes people cranky when they get sick. Because today is also National Grouch Day. So that's my favorite, because I love Oscar the Grouch. So, and I'm grouchy a lot. I'll call myself out. Okay, enough of that chit chat. We've got 2 students for the Pledge of Allegiance. We've got, for land acknowledgement statement, we first have London Marie Brown. Hi, can see you.
Hi.
Okay, London Marie, I'm going to read a little bit about you to our audience this evening. London Marie is an 8th grader at Roberts Naylor K-8. She began this school year as an 8th grader. In this short time, she's excelled in school academically and as a positive student leader. She's also a talented athlete participating in basketball and volleyball. In addition, she also is an exceptional artist. London Marie also works in the multiple medical disability classroom as a mentor, friend, and student aide. She works very hard to ensure that all students feel welcome at Roberts Naylor and truly embodies the Phoenix family core values. So, London Marie, if you want to read the land acknowledgement statement when it comes up on your screen.
Thank you. On behalf of the governing board of the Tucson Unified School District, I, London Marie Brown, acknowledge that the schools, buildings, and facilities of the Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral homeland of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the federally recognized tribal land of the Pasquayaki tribe.
Great. Thank you so much, London Marie, and I hope you have a great rest of the school year.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we are on to Pledge of Allegiance. Is Lily Lake here? There she is. Lily is my favorite name. All right, I'm going to read a little bit about Lily before she does the pledge. She's a 4th grader in GATE at Wheeler Elementary. She is, Lily Lake is one of our 4th grade GATE students who has her mom as her teacher, Mrs. Jody Lake. Hi, Mrs. Lake. And Lily enjoys all sorts of activities, such as being part of Wheeler Student Council and participating in gymnastics. Lily has also had the opportunities to perform at the Gaslight Theater, and we here at Wheeler are very proud of her for being a Wildcat who leads in excellence and kindness. So thank you for joining us, Lily. So whenever you are ready, and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you so much, Lily, and Mrs. Lake, thank you for coming. All right, now we are on to agenda adjustments. Dr. Trujillo.
Just doing a quick check for our lobbyists. I don't think that they've arrived yet. So we'll go ahead and keep, my only adjustment was going to be to move the lobbyists up, but I don't see they've arrived. They're coming in from Phoenix. We'll keep them where they're at, okay, on the agenda there. So with that, I don't have any agenda adjustments.
Okay. But keep your mic on because now we're going to go to superintendent's report.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome to TUSD Universe. Those of you watching out there online, those of you joining us here today at Duffy, here are some of the happenings for our first governing board meeting in the month of October. I want to congratulate CE Rose, their esports program. They did an absolutely wonderful job, their esports program, distinguishing themselves in Arizona's Children Rocket League Open on September 28th, hosted by Grand Canyon University in Phoenix. The team demonstrated exceptional skill and teamwork, sweeping the competition by securing first, second, and third place in Rocket League, a fast-paced video game that combines soccer with rocket-powered cars, scoring goals by driving and launching a giant ball into the opponent's net. A special commendation goes to our school champion, Adriano Gomez, who delivered an unforgettable performance, remaining undefeated throughout the event. The team also earned a total of $760 in prize money and had the unique opportunity to compete against Grand Canyon University varsity esports players in an exhibition match, where they displayed great sportsmanship in a closely contested contest, narrowly losing 3-1. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Arizona's children for hosting the Rocket League and for Grand Canyon University for providing such amazing facilities and their hospitality. Congratulations to the CE Rose esports team. On September 12th, I had an opportunity to spend some time with our principals out there at Howenstein. It was the first Instructional Leadership Academy of the year, a time when we get all of our principals together and we celebrate the start of a new year. It was our first time for an in-person convening since our principals have been back for the new school year. I want to thank Chief Executive Officer of the Boys Club of America, Dr. Shannon Roberts, Tucson chapter, for the time him and his team gave our principals, talking about the benefits of the Boys Club and all of the wonderful opportunities that membership brings, and of course for the delicious coffee and pastries provided by the Boys Club for our principals. Had an opportunity to talk to our principals about the state of the bond, an update on HVAC installations and some of the upcoming work that will happen with our bond coming up a little bit later on this year and of course in years to come. And also our principals received some wonderful in-service on the district's instructional framework. And then of course, working with our working with our administrative team from student relations on code of conduct training. So we can never have too much code of conduct training for our administrators. Busy month for me out on the road visiting several district schools. I want to thank the campus communities of Roberts Naylor, Soling Tom, Choya, Ochoa, Mission View, and Steele Elementary for some wonderful visits. A couple of highlights. Boy, was I impressed. Roberts Naylor, met by members of the student council. Oh, I guess we're starting there with Soling Tom. We can back it up to Soling Tom if you want. I want to thank Oscar Dotson for hosting me. Had an opportunity to meet the inaugural 6th grade class. Soling Tom is one of our schools. These are early adopters of K-6. What a tremendous, tremendous environment that the teacher there has created in its first year of 6th grade. Got to meet the librarian or the library assistant whose son is now teaching in the school and has been hired as a 3rd grade teacher. Wonderful mother-son story. Her son played baseball over at Sabino, actually played minor league baseball and came back to teach at TUSD and chose to work alongside his mom out there at Soling Tom. So one of the great family stories in TUSD. I want to thank Bernadette Rossenhauser for hosting me at Roberts Naylor. I think what a lot of people don't know about Roberts Naylor, number one, just how big it is. And number two, though it's long been known as a very welcoming and inclusive hub for the refugee student community along the 22nd Street corridor, a lot of people also don't know that it's one of our larger campuses with regard to on-site GATE programming. So there's a lot of academic diversity at Roberts Naylor. It has a very large GATE population. It also has a very large exceptional education population, while at the same time being one of our largest K-8 refugee population centers in the district. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of wonderful people supporting those programs. And I want to thank Principal Rossenhauser for putting that all together there at Roberts Naylor. I was very impressed by the student council leadership team that met me and walked me through the halls and introduced me to our staff and a lot of different students out there at Roberts Naylor. So wonderful, wonderful visit. I want to thank Principal Rosa Maria Duarte Raab for hosting me at Ochoa. And the highlight of my visit was meeting our University of Arizona student teachers there at Ochoa. Ochoa is a site that hosts a satellite program for teacher education where our student teachers do gather 2 days a week for their courses. I had an opportunity to address the group, thank them for serving the students of Tucson Unified School District, even if they don't go on to work as a certified teacher, which I did give my plug. You always are welcome to. We would love to see every one of you filling a teaching vacancy. But thank you all for your choice to go into public education and the amazing contribution you'll be making to our society. So wonderful opportunity there. I met a wonderful preschool team out there at Ochoa as well, getting ready for the day. So some great school visits out there at TUSD and visiting our wonderful schools out on the road. October, it is National Principals Month. And having been a principal myself for almost a decade, it is a labor of love. It is a relentlessly rigorous position that moves at the speed of light every single day. You are an ambassador for not only your school, but for the district. You're a statesperson, making sure that there's great relationships out there in the community. You're a peacemaker with students at conflict, or sometimes parents and teachers at conflict. You're a mayor. You have to make sure that the lights are on and that the trains run on time and that the bells are going off at the same time and that you're getting in all of your fire drills and all of your lockdown drills. And of course, you are an instructional expert, walking through classrooms, making sure that we are offering the highest level of instruction each and every day for every one of our students. So to our principals, we love you, we appreciate you, and we wish you an absolutely wonderful and happy Principals Month for the month of October. And I want to thank Dr. Charlotte Carter and her team for facilitating the first of what will be quarterly just general bond town hall updates for the community at large. No special reason. We just want to get into the habit of getting the community together and just updating them on progress made, with their bond dollars at work, using the tagline from the bond office, so that they're constantly plugged into the status of projects that have been approved, that have been completed, or that are in the works. Earlier in the month, October 1st, I had an opportunity to support our Native American Student Services Department as they gathered senior parents and seniors at Howenstein to have its senior graduation meeting. Not only did they review opportunities for credit recovery for seniors still needing to make up courses to be able to graduate on time, they also talked about on-campus resources that are available through the Native American Student Services Program for students struggling with any off-campus resources. That it could be transportation, it could be access to food, it could be access to internet or devices or counseling services. And then, of course, the big topic of the evening was my unwavering support for the Native American Student Services graduation readiness proposal that has my full support and will be mandatory for principals. And in a nutshell, the Native American Student Services graduation readiness proposal will require that every single principal does meet with every single graduating Native American student well in advance of graduation day, so that they are familiar with the student's tribal affiliation and the specific cultural adornments that will be worn on graduation day, so that the principal is personally informed of every single graduating Native American student on their respective campus. Well before the graduation ceremony, they will know what specific cultural adornment will be worn. They'll be provided pictures and images. And then our Native American students will be given contact information for Native American Student Services team members that they can call on the evening of graduation during the event if they do encounter any issues. So we are taking steps to be more prescriptive and directive with campus principals to make sure that our Native American students can wear their cultural adornments and celebrate their heritage on graduation night. And on October 4th, had an opportunity to participate in a very small and intimate roundtable discussion with Governor Katie Hobbs. I was one of 6 or 7 superintendents that got to engage the governor in a wide-ranging conversation that ranged from school safety, student mental health, the lack of capital funding, more funding needed for mental health needs, counselors, social workers. We talked a lot about the emergence of CTE as an alternative pathway pursuant to the event that we were there to celebrate there at Innovation Tech High School. And I do want to thank Dr. Ravi Shah for his eloquent remarks during the October 4th ribbon cutting to officially open up the new medical careers wing at Innovation Tech High School, and for representing the governing board and our district so well at that ribbon cutting. So Innovation Tech, of course, will now have the Connie Hillman Family Foundation Health and Wellness Center. That will be an additional option for students now to come on in. Our goal is to fill it with students for the daytime program specifically. I do want to thank the security and event teams for Governor Katie Hobbs. They were amazing to work with as they worked well with our on-site school safety personnel as well as the mayor. I want to thank her for attending. And we believe that this is going to lead to continued growth for Innovation Tech High School. Later on this month, it is going to be National School Bus Safety Week. October 21st through 25th will mark School Bus Safety Week. This is an important recognition because it serves as our opportunity to celebrate the contributions to the educational experience and to public education itself that our bus drivers provide. And the relationships that they provide to our students there is no value, there's no amount of money that can measure the value that they bring relationally to our students. Their commitment to safety and their commitment to bringing the district's absolutely most beautiful and precious cargo to school each and every single day, our learners. So I want to take this opportunity to express my deepest appreciation for all of our transportation employees, drivers, monitors, dispatchers, routing staff. All of them come together each and every single day with one mission, delivering our children and young people safely to school each and every single day. So thank you for that hard work and dedication. We look forward to celebrating you October 21st through the 25th. With that, President Luna Rose, members of the governing board, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Okay, now I do believe we're moving to call to the audience, so I will turn it over to Ms. Ekstrom.
Thank you. Public participation at board meetings. Members of the public may speak during the call to the audience. The governing board clerk shall be responsible for recognizing speakers and for maintaining order where it may be appropriate. Those who speak in person or want to have their comments read shall email or call the board office or complete a request to address the board form before the meeting. Speakers who have not completed a request form are not permitted to address the board. The speaker must state their full name and topic prior to addressing the board. Speakers are encouraged to be brief with a maximum time of 3 minutes. While more than one speaker may speak together in the time allowed, speakers are reminded that they are not allowed to speak more than once and they may not transfer or delegate their time to others. If there are documents for the board, please give them to the board office staff and they will ensure each board member receives a copy. Those attending the meeting and/or speaking before the board shall observe rules of good conduct. Speakers shall also refrain from inappropriate or slanderous remarks. And because TUSD serves students from preschool through high school, speakers should be aware there may be children present and listening. At the end of the call to the audience, the governing board president will ask if any board member wishes to respond to a criticism, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. No more than 2 members may address each topic. Contents of this card are public information. Our first speaker is Lillian Fox.
My name's Lillian Fox, President Luna Rose, members of the board, staff, and you've got this little thingy. I'm going to race through this because 3 minutes isn't enough time. The first page, the stuff in purple, shows that last year TUSD budgeted almost $1 million for out-of-state travel. That's $925,691.14. You have no money to fund the libraries. 67 schools got $40 or less, and yet we're spending $1 million on out-of-state travel. The superintendent here has $18,900 budgeted for out-of-state travel this year and last year. If you go to the next page, this is what a page from a budget book looks like. It shows the board approved it, and it also has the name of the superintendent, the CFO, and the cabinet on it. If you turn the next page, this is this year's budget book. It says you adopted on July 15. This document didn't exist on July 15th. You've never adopted it. You've never seen it before. Next page, the budget book is a mess. It's almost 5,000 pages. This table tells you how long it is, actually. Some of the sections, you'd have to use 750 pages printed on both sides to print just some sections of the budget book. You would have to have 8 of these 500-page packets to print the whole thing. It is a mess. Now, I'm done with that. I want to talk about the budget instead. This page, I've been giving this to you over and over again. We're one of the richest districts in the state. We get more money per student than almost any other district in the state, and yet we have miserable performance. Schools that don't have near the money we do, that have far more higher rates of poverty than we do, beat us all the time. And I also highlighted the places where you can look up information if you want to find out what the district's doing and how well your schools are doing. Okay, this is a page from the Auditor General's most recent report. TUSD, if you look at the bar charts, TUSD is the little pink bar that shows we're bad at math, we're bad at English, we're bad at science. The navy blue bars are the performance of school districts that have poverty levels similar to us. We don't do as well as guys who have our rate of poverty. The light blue bar is the average for Arizona. We're way below average. Now, turn to the next page. This is Auditor General again, and for years and years and years, as far back as I can remember, the Auditor General has said TUSD's spending for administration is very high every year. Is that 3 minutes?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
This is the most important chart. Look at it. Thank you.
Next is Pilar Costa Reese.
My name is Pilar Acosta Ruiz, and first I want to say some wonderful things about TUSD. I appreciate you extending the call to the audience last meeting, which you never usually do, so that certain letters could be read. So TUSD has some really awesome fine arts programs, some really awesome CTE programs, and the few schools that we still have as magnets are really awesome programs. I also want to say that we have some board members who do the right thing and ask a lot of questions and are really upholding their job as a public servant. So, statistics are like a bikini. What you expose is tantalizing, but what you cover up is vital. So the CFO did something on Facebook to, I believe, contradict some of the things that I have on my platform about we need to increase our classroom spending. And thank God for Ms. Fox, because she's so right on with her numbers. So apparently, if you take a look at this year's budget book and actually understand it, you'll see that we're putting less into the schools this year than we did last year. And the 2 years that we put a lot of money into the schools was when we had ESSER funds. So percentages are still well below state average. So it doesn't matter how much money you put into the school, the percentage of the total amount of money that you receive is still too low. I just want to say, based on the information that was shared at this last meeting, it might be in the best interest. I'm just a little perplexed as why the board and the district has been silent on the things that have been circulating around this community, because to me it seems like if something is substantiated, the board president, the board, legal, and the Trujillo are all complicit in what happened. So you really probably need to do something a little bit more than be silent. You need to cover your own behind. And I'm going to speak about labor again. It's come to my attention that pro-labor endorsed candidates did not follow the pledge that we signed with PALF to use locally endorsed print shops. So those unions that are listening, you need to understand that one of your candidates, Dr. Shaw, used a location in Phoenix, and that is against number 8 on the PALF agreement that you signed. You cannot say you are pro-labor if you do not follow your word. Integrity is everything. Thank you.
Next, we have 2 to be read. The first is Jason Blackwood, paid parental leave. Dear governing board members, I am thoroughly appalled by Val Romero and his so-called comments from constituents. I can buy the fact that perhaps some people go to him because he's the MAGA candidate, but what I can't buy into is his comment, if I had a miscarriage, I'd go back to work within a week. How gross is it to assume you know what a woman who miscarries goes through? You are not fit to serve on the board, much less any other office that you try to run for by placing a sticker over the last office you tried to run for. I appreciate all the comments that the other members had, and I appreciate that my family will benefit from this new paid parental leave policy. Sincerely, Jason Blackwood, parent. Next is Guadalupe Henninger, reimbursed members. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Trujillo, Legal Counsel President Natalie Luna Rose, Clerk Jennifer Ekstrom. My name is Guadalupe Henninger, and I'm in favor of item 5.7. Our board members are volunteers and deserve to be reimbursed for the expenses they incur while performing the duties in support of the district. I am very happy Natalie Luna Rose, Dr. Ravi, Sadie Shaw, that they are running for re-election. They have been the wisdom of being on the board for 4 years. TUSD is heading in the right direction under their leadership. They have done a world of good. Please vote for them so they keep making our district better for everybody in TUSD. November 5th is Election Day. We, the people, with the power of our vote, set up the government and vote for the ones who have common sense, logic, principle, honesty, and truth. The one who is going to protect our freedom and protect our constitutional rights. We are not helpless. We have a power in our vote. Let's go and vote. Voting is our civic duty. We have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that concludes the call to the audience.
All right, thank you very much. And I know we have a small audience tonight, but I did want to acknowledge our interpreter, Angelica, sitting up front. Board members, any questions or comments? Ms. Shaw?
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who spoke at the call to the audience today. I would like to thank Lillian Fox for printing all this information that's on the website where our new budget books are being housed. I prefer the old way. And so I actually requested from that website, like the entire document, and I was sent an email back stating that they would need a few days to compile all of the pages, and it's I suppose it's because it's so long, and so yeah, I would like our CFO to go back to the old way, because I think, you know, as a board, we got used to reading the document in the way that it was presented, and I'm sure the public did as well. And if you haven't checked it out, I invite you to look at the agenda and follow the link, because although it's like kind of pretty to look at, it's more confusing. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Romero?
Again, yes, thanks Lillian Fox for always bringing us good information. And just kind of a response to something directed towards me. Again, like I said, everything I said last weekend on that, I read from somebody else. This was not me. I got attacked by others saying it was me that said this. I did not say these things. I was reading things that people, constituents, reach out to me. My job as a board member is to reflect what they have to say to the public. If they don't trust or are approachable to any of the other board members, and they can only approach me, it's my responsibility to them. So I will continue to do that. I appreciate your opinion on that. But again, everything that I said was all read, nothing from my opinion. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Do believe we are ending call of the audience. So now we are on to consent agenda. Approval of consent agenda items 5.2 through 5.7. Board members, any questions? All right, if not, I will move the item.
I'll second.
All right, moved by myself, second by Dr. Shaw. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. We are on to action items. 6.1, Tucson Unified School District FY 2024 Annual Financial Report. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Luna Rose, members of the governing board, I'd like to welcome our Chief Financial Officer, Ricky Hernandez, for the presentation of our annual financial report, which is a state of the district's financial affairs, specifically in the areas of revenues and expenditures for the fiscal year that ended on June 30th, 2024. Not to be confused, to those of you in the audience, with the what is it now? We're calling it now the CAFR?
The ACFR.
The ACFR, which is the report from the external auditors that comes a little bit later on in the year.
Right.
This information is utilized by our external auditors to put together their report. With that, I'll turn it over to our CFO.
Yeah, so as Dr. Trujillo mentioned, good evening, board members. This is the annual financial report for the school district for the fiscal year that ended on June 30th. It's a comprehensive review of the revenues and expenditure activity of all of our funds. It is primarily used for, to calculate carryover. It is used for the calculation of the classroom expenditure report that is published by the Auditor General in the spring. So without further ado, we'll go right into it. So like I mentioned, it helps, these are the kind of the three big things that I mentioned at the top. What this is not an audit report. This is not the annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR, that is produced by our external auditors. They publish that and present it to the audit committee. They will do so later in the year. The information in here is reconciled. It is unaudited. Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that this is not an audit report. It is unaudited information. So what do we look, where do we stand? So at the end of fiscal year 24, our M&O budget had a budget balance ending of $32 million. That is approximately 8% of our total budget. We spent about 92% of it. Our classroom site fund actually ended up with a budget balance of $17.6 million. Capital outlay, $7 million, about 78% of our budget. Now, our federal grants show that we overspent. That is actually because we did not revise our budgets for the various federal programs. There were expenditures that went out. Nevertheless, that $20 million budget balance deficit is going to be covered through reimbursements from the Arizona Department of Education. Same for the state grants that you notice that have a 472 budget balance deficit. Those are actually all reimbursable grants. You're always going to be carrying a deficit until those funds are reimbursed in the next fiscal year. So overall, we had a revised budget of over $721 million, almost $658 million in outlays, about $63.7 million budget balance. So about 91% of our budget was spent according to the various activities authorized in those funds. Now, just a few items to report also. These are some key funds that I tend to kind of pull out to report to you. So just to kind of take a look at some activity. Food service is one of the biggest ones. A few items to note. Food service, actually all of these funds are all based on cash availability. They may have a budget that they're required to produce, especially for our purposes. They may overspend that budget, but ultimately they're allowed to spend if cash is available. So for example, the food service budget may have a $26 million budget. They overspent by just under $278,000, but they had a cash balance of $3.2 million. So that allowed them to continue to spend for the activities within the food service fund. For the community schools and the infant and early learning centers, we combine those together. They're all treated as a community school. So even though the IELCs ran a cash balance deficit, they had a budget balance profit. So they actually underspent their total budget by about $1.3 million. Same thing for the community schools, which include all our after-school programs or before school programs and other activities in community schools. Overall, they had a net positive cash balance of $2.2 million. Indirect costs, same thing. A budget balance deficit of $4 million, but we had a cash balance of $3 million. Debt service, we had a budget balance of $7 million, a deficit of $7 million, but we have a cash balance of $14 million. That specifically has a cash balance of $14 million because we collect taxes in one fiscal year and make a payment on July 1. So on July 1, that $14 million went out the door to make our debt service payment. So that's the cash balance that was available on June 30th. Our bond funds continue to have an available cash balance of over $147 million. We continue to spend those down as we make progress on our bond program. And then finally, our employee benefits trust ended up with a cash balance of $29.3 million. As you can see in some of our key federal programs, particularly Title I, about 90% of the budget was spent, leaving a carry forward of just over $2.8 million. IDEA, which is for our exceptional ed students, had just a carry forward of over $1 million. And ESSER 3, we made it to the end, $61,000 out of $276 million. So it's, yeah, that's essentially rounding. I mean, that's really what I call it when you have a $276 million fund. $61,000 will be returned to the Department of Education once they notify us of the final completion report. But ultimately, all the ESSER programs are not completely closed. Just a quick rundown of desegregation budget to actual. This is specifically around M&O. M&O had a $61.4 million budget around deseg. It spent, in the prior year, it spent $60 million. So we actually spent an additional $1.3 million this fiscal year compared to the prior year. Most of that was obviously in salaries that actually went out the door. But ultimately, this is the pattern that continues to, unfortunately, inhabit desegregation as we continue to increase the cost of our labor, be that through the increased cost of benefits or increased salary expenses. The fact that we have a flat $63.7 million fund will continue to contribute to the increasing in the M&O budgeted expenses year over year as those costs continue to increase. Ultimately, our budget balance carry forward for M&O has an additional carry forward of $4 million available. Capital will have an additional carry forward of $2 million versus the adopted carry forward that we had in July of $28 and $5 million. Those items will actually be incorporated into the December revision once ADE confirms all of our numbers. In our annual financial report, we will also include other up and down budget adjustments. Our 40th day, for example, just came and went at the end of September. So those numbers will now be revised up or downwards based on how we landed with that ADM. Now, of that $2 million additional carry forward, $1.8 million is already assigned to roll over FY24 projects. So truly, there are expenses that did not complete their projects by the end of fiscal year 24 that have now rolled over into fiscal year 25. So that cash and therefore that budget balance is following through. Some of those projects are like the construction at Borman. There was about $100,000 left in the 3-year program capital allocation for fine arts. Dr. Ashcraft is in the process of receiving her final items that won't get here till November. So we carried forward her additional about $100,000 into fiscal year 25. We have other projects along the way that total about $1.8 million that continue to be spent. But ultimately, we still bring in that $2 million number. About $1.8 million of it is spoken for. Classroom spending. So as I noted before, the classroom spending actually is going to be calculated by the Auditor General come the spring. So in the spring, they will actually determine where we actually landed. They're going to look at our data and make sure that everything looks correct. Now, our instructional spending will be down. I am projecting a downward of instructional spending, but that is offset by the fact that we've increased student support and instructional support. Now, I know the focus has been previously on administration. Administration is 9.1. Last year was about 8.6, so it's about a 0.5% increase. It should be noted that administration includes our school administrators, our principals, our assistant principals, and their support staff as well. It is not just central administration that is part of that 9.1. Ultimately, though, the fact that the pie is getting smaller and we're not necessarily putting more dollars into any one specific element just means that the denominator is getting larger and the numerator is getting smaller. So therefore, the percentages are going to change. They're actually going to move downward. This is not abnormal for all school districts. This is a pattern that is actually other school districts are experiencing. ESSER is absolutely contributed to this effect, right? We went from spending $172 million in ESSER 3 to $64 million to $40 million. And so as we knew that those 3 years would continue to progress, we continued to move dollars off the rolls. This was a commitment that we made to the community, that your predecessors made to the community in regards to the use of ESSER dollars for long-term positions. But one of the biggest things that grew out of this was our student support services. You now have a social emotional learning department that didn't exist before the pandemic. We now actually have a lot of positions that are placed across the district, RTI positions, MTSS coordinators, curriculum service providers. A lot of those positions came in from ESSER that are now part of student support and instruction support. They're not necessarily providing direct services to kids in the form of instruction, but they are providing services to students in the form of counseling, in the form of librarians, in the form of custodial, food service, transportation. Now, plant operations continues to increase, and that just has, that's a huge factor as it relates to the cost of actually doing business around managing our facilities. The cost of utilities is part of plant operations. That has gone up significantly in the last year. The cost of actually doing the business of maintaining facilities has gone up exponentially in the last several years. So as the denominator continues to shrink and the fact that we have to reallocate expenses to other elements that support student instruction, that doesn't mean that we're not committing dollars overall to the classroom. They may just not be committed specifically to teachers. Overall, we're still spending about 3/4 of our entire budget on a student-centric and teacher-centric mission. Whether it's professional development, whether it's instruction, or whether it's support services to kids. So we just kind of need to be mindful of how to interpret the fact that people love looking at pie charts, but don't really understand kind of the dollars and cents that make up those pie charts. And those dollars and cents will come forward when the Auditor General produces her report in the month of March. And then we'll go over it again.
Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah, I think the most important, I keep forgetting to use my microphone. Yeah, the most important thing for those watching in the public is when you look at the orange and you look at the violet/purple and you look at the dark aqua, that's almost 70% of the district budget that's in schools. The orange, it's in schools in the form of teachers and teachers' assistants. The purple, it's at schools in the form of counselors and social workers. And of course, the aqua, it is in the form of professional development, teacher coaches, CSPs that are working on our campuses, that are coaching new teachers, and all the PD and training that's available to teachers. So that's an overall picture of instructional spending for the schools. The other thing I'll say is maybe this is more for the budget book presentation. I know we were handed a graphic that says that 56% of our district budget is spent on departments, not necessarily schools. When we get to the budget book, I'll ask you to demonstrate how that consists of transportation, which is service to students, how that consists of food service, that's service to students, and how much of that is custodial, which is also service to students, grounds, also service to students. It's not just 56% of the budget coming to 1010. But that might be for the budget book.
Yeah,
when you can actually
I'll
get in
explain
and
about
break
that in the budget book presentation. So, as I mentioned, kind of what's changed, obviously the decreasing influence of ESSER. We've increased instructional spending and support spending during peak ESSER years. You can see that the spending in 23 and 24 have gone down by 1/3 and then 2/3. The decline in instructional spending was actually a 60% decline in non-staff spending. We didn't hire fewer people. We didn't stop paying fewer people. We'd stop buying stuff. That's where the decline in instruction. That includes the fact that we haven't adopted a textbook in this school district until last year. That is instructional spending that we actually haven't had. So we just need to be mindful of when you actually parse and pull back the curtain and kind of talk to the wizard about it, he's going to tell you that ultimately your stuff is really what you didn't buy. But the people are still there. We haven't had this like mass layoff of people. So just kind of be mindful. The other categories that I'm showing, instructional support had a 3% increase staffing costs. CSPs were hired, a lot of professional development was being done. We provided a lot of stipends. Administration had an increase in staffing costs of less than 1%. Actually, the percentage was 0.7. So again, increasing in staffing costs, that includes our principals, our assistant principals, our office managers. All of those individuals are part of the administrative calculation. Food service had an increase of 8%. You want to talk about increases? Let's talk about food service. Let's talk about the cost of milk. Let's talk about the cost of fruit. Let's talk about the cost of materials to service kids, right? So the increase of commodities is a huge factor for Lindsay's budget, including her staffing. I mean, obviously we have cafeteria staffing all over the district. So that is one significant portion. And transportation had an increase of 4%. And I've talked to you till I'm blue in the face about that one. We provided significant increases in salaries to our bus drivers, rightfully so. But that means that there's a rob Peter to pay Paul situation, right? So we have to figure out how we're gonna fund those items, particularly with transportation. Food service is a completely different animal. We cannot use M&O funding to support food service. It's actually against the law. So food service is a complete self-sustaining enterprise in this school district, and it always has been. And Lindsay, to her credit, has done a magnificent job of always keeping a very nice fat cushion to ensure that she administers her funding properly due to the increased cost of commodities. So I just wanted to point out some of these different categories that have kind of been brought about. But there's still items for future consideration as we kind of close out on the AFR presentation. So we need to talk about increased staffing costs with declining enrollment. That is, 90% of our budget is people, people of all kinds. And so we need to talk about what does it mean when we have increasing costs of staff when we don't have the kids. We need to talk about the increased demand on plant services at campuses with declining enrollment as well. We've got a lot of crumbling campuses. Unfortunately, the bond will get to a lot of those, but the bond isn't going to cure the whole thing. Like I said, the bond is not for maintenance, the bond is for infrastructure. But we need to talk about how we invest in plant dollars essentially on campuses that don't have the enrollment, because that's an investment in a campus that, that we need to have a conversation about. The fact that the state is projecting flat revenue. The JLBC just came out with their October financial report, and they're predicting no new money in fiscal year 26. So we're not, the state is not coming to save anybody, no matter whether you're K-12, Access, or the universities. Stability of the district's fund balance as more bonds are issued. We need to always take a look at the fact that how we outlay, no matter what it's for, is going to affect how we're rated from our bonding capacity. And we need to capitalize on opportunities for enrollment growth in areas where people are actually at, where the population growth actually exists. And these are topics that we've talked about, we've alluded to in the past, but this is going to affect our financial picture as we kind of move into the future. Fiscal year 25 for a lot of school districts is going to be a bellwether year, because this is the first year where we don't have a huge influx of federal funding to support our causes. And so we're on our own, and we have to figure that out. With that sobering thought, any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez, for your presentation. Board questions. Mr. Romero.
So you had mentioned central administration, site administration are together. Is that just how we do it, or is there a way that we can see what they are separate?
I mean, I can report them separately. The way the Auditor General does them is they put them together.
But if we, as a board, wanted to see those pulled out,
if you wanted to see them pulled out, I mean,
okay,
we can do them pulled out.
Okay, I was just kind of curious on that one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Shaw.
All right, thank you, President Luna Rose. Thank you for the presentation tonight. My question was about the increase in the carry forward. Is that and there was an increase in carry forward for M&O and for capital, which is good because it'll help shore up the budget for a little longer as we run deficit budgets with the carry forward that we have. What is the reason for the increase? Is it because of vacancy savings like we have in previous years? And especially for the capital, what was the reason for the carry forward on that?
So for M&O first, a lot of it is vacancy savings. So one is one of those items. A lot of it is actually movement of expenses to other funding sources that were eligible for funding that came in, whether that be into Title I or whether that be into ESSER. So as we start reconciliation at the end of the fiscal year, this may generate additional carry forward. You know, I go conservative with $28 million. Last year, our carry forward was actually $38 million. So this is still a decrease in our carry forward year over year. But that $4 million is really attributed to the fact that we had more vacancy savings under expenses for benefits and salary costs in particular. Now with capital, like I mentioned, about 1.8 million of that $2 million number are projects that are just unfinished in fiscal year 24 moving into 25. So we're moving that balance along with those projects. They're going to continue to spend. My biggest example, like I mentioned to you, is Borman. Was one of the biggest ones.
So that's allocated, but just
that's allocated.
Okay, just
yeah,
push into
it's
this
there.
year.
It's assigned already. Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you for the presentation. So you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that this was the unaudited numbers for the budget, for the annual financial report. And so would the Auditor General, I guess, well, first, Jean, can you go to slide 8? So would the Auditor General,
which one is?
Slide 8. It's the classroom spending estimate.
Okay.
Oh, you're controlling it. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jean.
it's okay. I got it, Jean. I'll get there.
Cool. I guess my question is, would the Auditor General then consider transportation, plant operations, administration, and food service as a appropriate category for classroom spending?
They don't. Those aren't considered part of classroom spending. Classroom spending is instruction, student support, and instruction support. That's classroom spending. The rest of them are non-classroom spending: admin, plant, and food and transportation.
And so are you, in this slide and in this annual financial report, including all of those categories in classroom spending?
No.
You're not?
No, because 49 plus 11 is 60 plus 8 is 68. And I believe I said it's, I don't know if I said it somewhere, but no. That 31.7% is representative of the smaller pie chart to the right. So that 31.7 is comprised of the 4 segments, which are the non-classroom spending. The 3 on the left, the red, the purple, and that bluish color, that's classroom spending all together, if you add those 3 percentages together.
Right, but that doesn't make up 100% without that 31.7, which isn't really proper to include in classroom spending.
Well, but I'm not including it in classroom spending. Like, the report is called Classroom Spending Report. So that's why I use classroom spending estimate. What we use for classroom spending, the way you want to define it, is on the 3 kind of 2 chunks, which is why I pulled that 31% out, because that is on its own. That is non-classroom spending that is comprised by the 13, 46, 47, and 91. I'm calling it classroom spending because that is the title of the report that the Auditor General produces.
It's a little confusing. Let me see. So the actual document that we'll be submitting, not this pretty one, but
not
the
this one. It's the report with all the
the different
tables,
charts and stuff.
Yeah,
tables. So in that chart, are you saying that there is no food service, transportation, anything in that pie chart on the right included in the classroom spend?
Yeah, those are not part of classroom spending. No, classroom spending is the 49.2, the 10.9, and the 8.2. Those 3 segments, which are instruction, student support, and instruction support, are defined as classroom spending in state statute.
Okay, it's confusing. I know this isn't what we're submitting, but I think to the public it would seem, since, we're looking at something that's supposed to be whole, and it includes things that don't really fall into classroom spending on a slide that says classroom spending. It's confusing to me. I see the document, and it looks like administration is there. I'm on page 7 of the 10-page document that we'll be submitting. Can you pull up that other document, Jean, that is in this item? And then, Ricky, if you can just walk us through where classroom spending is here and what's listed in these charts. Or
So
what's not listed, rather.
you can pull it up, Gene. It's none of this chart or these numbers aren't in that AFR. That's not what the AFR reports. The Auditor General will take the data from the AFR to create this. So this is my estimate based on the data that I have. Ultimately, the Auditor General is going to run through whatever process they do to produce the colorful report that comes out on March 1st. So you can pull up the report, but for example, this includes Title I, right, or ESSER. Title I and ESSER in that report aren't broken down by function. So if you go to page 3, Gene, that's all of the spending in M&O, 3. And yeah, so that's that's, for example, all of the spending in M&O broken up by all the different categories. Obviously, that is one segment of what goes into the calculation, but this is just one fund. We include every single fund with the exception of debt service funds, some capital funds, student activities funds, some unemployment insurance funds. So there are funds that we report on this AFR that are not part of the calculation, and the Auditor General lists those out. So we can look at this, and this is really just kind of presenting to you what we expensed, what the budget was, what we expensed in fiscal year 23, and what the differences are. But that chart is not really represented in any one of these kind of data pieces.
Okay.
Dr. Trujillo.
Mr. Hernandez, can you go to page 4 while we're on the topic?
Yeah. Page 4 of this or the
actual report, the expenditure.
Yeah.
So here in unrestricted capital outlay, Fund 610 on the expenditure report.
on the
Yeah, I do want to bring to the board's attention and the community. I know that there's been some previous commentary that the district only spends $18,000 to $20,000 on library books and readers and instructional aids. We actually spent $7.3 million for the year that just ended. It's because that is an expenditure paid out of unrestricted capital outlay, and that covers library books, textbooks, and instructional aids. Now, the thing that I think we all need to understand is 2 very important points. Principals are the primary purchasing authority, with these dollars. And when they purchase books, a lot of them are now purchasing books to stock inside the classroom libraries so that teachers have readily accessible books that they can give out to students. This is the funding source for that. We also have principals that, yes, are buying library books and supplementary readers for their libraries. So it's all mixed into this one expenditure category. I think when you look at the other category, library expenses, it deals more with supplies and the things that we buy logistically for libraries so they can operate operationally.
It's page 5, Gene.
Yeah.
So it's the next page.
Yeah, I think it's page 5 of 14 where we go to unrestricted capital
Right there,
outlay.
yeah.
I just feel like this is a good opportunity to kind of really show the picture of what we're actually spending on library books, textbooks, and instructional aids.
Other questions?
Yes, I have a question about the slide that talks about the desegregation funds.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could go back to the presentation, Jean, thank you. I think it's above this slide, a couple slides up. Pest control.
Oh, there it is.
There
Sorry.
it is. You're good. Thank you. So fiscal year 24 expenses listed as 61,000, and then for 23 it's 60,000. Seems like every meeting the DSEG budget rises and falls. I know we have around a little less than 64 million, right, that we're supposed to that we can't go above, and we have to spend it or else it goes away. And I was under the impression that in fiscal year 24 we had spent like the maximum amount, and here it looks like we're 2 million short roughly.
Yeah, if you recall my comment, this is just maintenance and operations. So the other side of the DSEG formula is capital. So about 1.8, 1.9 million is not listed here because that's the lesser of the expenses, which is all capital expenses that DSEG pays for. This is M&O, only M&O, because this is the brunt of where DSEG spending happens, is in the maintenance and operations fund. So, I mean, I can certainly give you all the breakout by unitary, by USP category for capital if you'd like to see that, but this is just M&O.
I see. Thank you for clarifying.
Mr. Hernandez, I had a question. Just out of curiosity, and you don't have to scroll back if you don't want to. So, although it's the slide before this, concerning Title I and IDEA. So are we gonna, because Esther's gone, are we gonna see an increase in any, do you know if we're gonna be seeing an increase in any of that? I know
not.
that's more federal,
Yeah.
but.
Title I is actually not, we saw a decrease in Title I. It's relatively flat to decrease, and that has to do with the way that the state did the counting for students who are considered impoverished. That's done by the census. The number of kids who were counted in Pima County, unfortunately, is undercounted, which is something that we know happened particularly in rural, low income and reservation areas. So that affects our Title I allocation because it's comprised of our enrollment and then the low income count for kids between the ages of 3 and 21. IDEA is also seeing a decrease in the population, and that one is specifically generated by the count of our students who are identified as ex-ed. And we have had a slight decrease in total head count for SPED students, which is why the IDEA fund has decreased. So those, for the particular moment, are not going to see any new money. Congress currently has just renewed funding all the way to December or November, I believe. It's flat. Unless something else happens, there's something happening next month where people are going to get elected to this thing. So unless that changes and that funding moves, we're basically kind of at a standstill. The problem is that the biggest driver of these numbers, like everything else in our district funding, is enrollment. So even if money were to go up on a per pupil basis, if our enrollment continues to decline, we're just not going to benefit from an increase in Title I or IDEA.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Romero.
So just real quick so I can understand. So on the unrestricted capital outlay, we talked about 7,371,000, going for library books, textbooks, instructional aids. How is that separated for all the different schools?
There isn't an allocation of library or instructional aid or textbook allocations to schools. Textbooks are adopted centrally, right? Those are managed by Ms. Aranda and by Dr. Hewitt. You get your presentations and then they're dispersed out to the schools for their benefit. Instructional aids may be purchased centrally. Some of them are purchased by the schools, whether it's an AP supplement or a Title I supplement. That's at the discretion of the principal and his or her staff. Same thing with the library books. They are given an allocation of teaching supplies. We used to give out an allocation of library books. That was over a decade ago, before the Great Recession, when we still had something called soft capital. Soft capital was money that was available to purchase textbooks, library books, computers, things that weren't like capital, right? The legislature decided that they were going to collapse those. They got rid of soft capital, turned it into this fund called District Additional Assistance, and created a capital outlay fund. Now that fund has to do everything plant and everything instructional, which is why I've given you kind of the adage of what's more important, the toilet or their textbook, right? Because that's where we are now. That's the funding. Ultimately, that allocation we give to the schools, they can use it for any type of supply. Instructional supply, library book, whatever the case may be. We give that discretion to the school, because that's kind of the discretion that we give to our school leaders to decide what's best for their kids.
Yeah, and I guess that makes sense because each one has their own little culture over there. And I know what Dr. Trujillo said, like when I do the Love of Reading Month, there's a lot of classrooms where we can go into the classroom and they have tons of books in their classroom that we can just pull and read. I know ones we would read at the library, usually they would bring in a couple classes together to accommodate more of the kids, or there were bigger type of libraries. But I have seen a lot of what Dr. Trujillo was mentioning. So, okay, that helps me understand where that funding is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, board members, any other questions? Ms. Ekstrom.
I think just for transparency's sake, if we could just add that extra funding for DSEG, that way everybody can see it and there's no questions.
Sure.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything further? All right. I would move the item.
Second.
Okay. Moved by myself, seconded by Ms. Shaw. All those in favor say aye.
I didn't
That's me.
second it. It was extra.
I'm sorry, Ms. Ekstrom. So I was looking at you and I heard Jennifer. I'm sorry, Ms. Ekstrom. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it. Thank you. And do not go anywhere, Mr. Hernandez. We are at 6.2, Tucson Unified School District FY 2024 School Level Annual Financial Report. Dr. Trujillo.
Back over to Mr. Hernandez for the school level financial report for a more detailed look at revenue and expenditure outcomes for our schools.
So this is an additional requirement to the annual financial report. One of the requirements that the legislature imposed on school districts is to essentially take that entire report that I provided to you and break it down to every school. We obviously have 88 schools, so all that detail is out there. I would not recommend printing it unless you have like tag board, because that's the form the Auditor General puts these together. So the purpose of the SLFR is providing just a detail of the revenue and expenses across all of our schools. What happened down at the site level. It's a required component of the AFR for school districts and charter schools, and it's compiled using the exact same data that we use for the AFR. So literally we're using the identical data, but we're now reporting it on a school by school estimate. So the reporting elements in here, it presents to you the total revenues generated by the weighted ADM, how much funding at the federal, state, and local level was allocated to the district, how much of the classroom site fund was used across every single one of our schools, how much of all of these items, that teacher pay, classroom supplies, and other expenses, again, allocated across our schools. And then there's other relevant information. It's pretty granular. You can come up with a whole permutation of things that you wanted to. I didn't really put a lot into this SLFR, considering that AFR is really what the basis of it is. But here are a few things to consider. So the SPED spending, they call it SPED, we call it XED, they determined that it was less than the base weighted IDEA and other SPED funding the district had. Now, two things to consider. This report only accounts for what's called Group A SPED. These are kids in those specific categories of of disability. So this is what they use. It excludes what's called Group B SPED. And we have probably more students identified with these specific groupings than in the Group A. I mean, one of the biggest ones is autism. So that's not part of the calculation in determining SPED spending or spending for ex-ed students. So that's one of the biggest reasons, is the fact that we are allocating more and more dollars to our Group B kids than our Group A kids. So we may not necessarily be spending more on Group A students, but we are certainly spending more as a whole, particularly out of M&O. We spent $51 million out of our M&O budget on ex-ed students, and that doesn't include the IDEA component.
This is one of the topics we discussed with the governor, increased funding for special education, the general consensus with the traditional school districts like AMPI, TUSD, Flowing Wells. We're seeing more and more students with more intensive disabilities in the Group B category come in because charters and privates, let's just say that it's not as an inclusive environment for them as it is with us. And so your privates and your charters are more likely going to be able to see Group A students, which are a little bit more cost effective for them because they're students with milder learning disabilities that might be able to do well in a general education classroom with just general accommodations, versus what you see in Group B, which a lot of times requires a one-on-one aid. It requires hygiene. A lot of these students are wheelchair bound. They're in medically fragile environments. And so the more money that we funnel away from A into B, the costlier it becomes without that additional funding from the state. So I know this is a priority and probably will come up a little bit later when our lobbyists present, but definitely was a big topic with the governor, with the other superintendents.
And the next item, teacher salary expenditures. Over 70% of our expenditures for teacher salaries was focused on what's called regular ed, while 20% was focused on special ed students. The remaining 10% was focused on CTE, gifted, English language development, athletics, smaller categories of instruction. 80% of our teacher salaries are funded from state and local sources. So our state aid, state grants, local taxpayers fund the majority of our teacher pay. So our federal grants, certainly as they should be, are supplemental to all of that. Overall, the district allocated over $605 million in local, state, and federal revenues across all of our schools and departments. That doesn't include, like I mentioned before, the bond, the debt service, and our internal service funds. Those are not part of this calculation. Those are monies that are generated outside of the revenue formula that is used for the SLFR. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I actually do have a question. We can go back to your slide. There you go. Okay. So, excuse me if I missed it, but how come the Group B students are just not calculated?
They're given their own individual weight.
Okay.
So they're not calculated at the same rate for the reasons that Dr. Trujillo mentioned. There are specific services that are specific to those individual groups of kids that have to be funded outside of the formula. We get funding for them, but we get funding for them separately from the Group A students. The issue is that one of the other things to consider as part of the Group B spending is that a lot of the services that those kids receive are not necessarily direct instruction, right? I mean, they're receiving instruction because they're required to, but the aids that they have, the psychology services that they receive, any of the other kind of services that are required for any of those Group B kids are not considered instruction. So that is kind of one of the biggest categories that affects the instructional spending formula, is that those services that those kids need in order to receive instruction in those classrooms are not part of classroom instruction. Their aids are not considered instructional aids because they're 504 aids or they're special needs aids. So unfortunately, it's the way the formula is set up. Certainly it is not enough. Again, to Dr. Trujillo's point, one of the other things is that both Group A and Group B SPED students, because there's an increasing cost in their services, we're also siphoning money away from non-SPED students in order to service SPED kids because of the nature of the costs and the fact that we're not receiving the funding to support the level of service that these kids need, and that we know that we have to provide.
Okay, and I know this is obviously comes down from a state level, but it just makes it sound like, once again, students with disabilities and those who have severe disabilities are being pushed this way because they cost so much money. So we don't even want to count them. Dr. Trujillo.
Really what happens is they'll go to charter school A, and charter school A might read a script to the parent. It says, we comply with providing free access to public education, FAPE as it's known, to students with disabilities through universal accommodations that are available in a general classroom environment. Well, if I'm wheelchair bound and I'm medically fragile and I have a TBI, or I'm severely and significantly cognitively impaired, that's not going to work for me. So the parent is going to turn right around out the door, and they're going to go to Flowing Wells, or they're going to go here because our two districts, AMPHI 2, have the deepest infrastructure for XED. And that's really what's happening. And it also happens with vouchers. You may see a Group B disability family actually accept a voucher and actually try to go to one of these schools, and the script will be read, and then all of a sudden that family that was originally given the voucher is back here at TUSD. So it's an issue, and I think it's not analogous just to TUSD or even Tucson. Like I said, our sister districts are seeing it as well. Typically, 40th day, when a charter or a private, when they collect the funding from the state, we will typically see a bump in those students coming through our door after that 40th day. So it's definitely a challenge. And then I think what you may have noted is when we lose enrollment, that Group A and that Group B funding actually goes out the door with the student that we lost as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just as an example, a student who is identified with autism generates about $29,000 over and above the ADM that we receive for that student. That generally is not enough to cover the tuition at a private school with the voucher that they may receive, because they get 90% of that. Right. So they inevitably come back.
Okay. Thank you. Board members, any other questions? Okay. I will move the item.
Second.
Okay. Moved by myself, seconded by Ms. Ekstrom. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we are on to 6.3, approval to reappoint community member to the Employees Benefits Trust for a 3-year term to expire October 15th, 2027. Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah, I'd like to turn this over to our governing board liaison, Dr. Ravi Shah, to introduce the candidate.
One moment, excuse me. All right, thank you, and sorry for the delay. I was just getting the document pulled up here. So Lauren Shedd has already been serving on the Employees Benefit Trust, and she's willing to continue with us. We really appreciate all of our volunteer members of the Employees Benefit Trust. I think it's one of the committees that have don't get as much publicity or glory for the important work it does. It manages the, I think, $36 million Employees Benefits Trust every year, which includes all of our health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, and other insurances that we have for our employees, and makes recommendations to the governing board to help us be more effective in managing the benefits of all of our employees. So before us, we have the recommendation from the Employees Benefits Trust to continue Lauren Shedd for another term on the trust committee.
Okay. Board members, any questions for Dr. Shaw? Okay. Dr. Shaw, would you like to move the item?
Yeah, I'll move the item.
All right.
Second.
Okay. So moved by Dr. Shaw, seconded by Ms. Shaw. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. And please thank Ms. Shedd for wanting to serve another term.
Thank you.
Ms. Luna Rose,
Yes.
Mark Mansfield, the chair is on. I don't know if you want to comment or.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, let's, if Mr. Mansfield is on, if he wants to speak.
I just appreciate you renewing her term. The board members or the trust members are all very dedicated, make all the meetings. We always have a quorum. And I appreciate their support, and I appreciate Dr. Shaw's support on supporting us.
Thank you, Mr. Mansfield. And again, thank you for wanting to serve. Okay. Now we will go on to 6.4. Approval to dismiss a committee member on the Bond Oversight Committee due to a resignation. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, I'd like to turn this over to the board's liaison to the BOC, Bond Oversight Committee, Governing Board Member Ekstrom.
Thank you. Yes, we had a resignation of Ms. Montserrat Caballero. She just couldn't make the meetings, so she decided to resign from the committee. So we will open it up to have another people apply, and hopefully we'll get some great community members who want to be a part of the bond committee. And I think maybe Ms. Miranda Carter is on, if she wants to add anything.
Mrs. Miranda Carter.
Thank you, President Luna Rose, board members. As Ms. Ekstrom stated, Ms. Caballero, I did reach out to her several times. She did respond to me right before our last meeting, and due to scheduling conflicts, she did formally resign from the committee.
Okay. Thank you. And how many, so this will bring it down to 12? Okay, so how can the community apply to the bond committee?
So we will have Ms. Barboa post that on our website, and I will share it through social media.
And we'll have the application is on the Bond Oversight Committee website, so they can apply through there, and then we'll forward it on to the committee to discuss and then make their recommendation to the board.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right.
Can I say really quick?
Yes, Dr. Shaw.
To add that Employees Benefits Trust also has openings, and I believe most of our committees have openings as well. So I want to encourage any of our members of our audience here and online to really step up and help support our district by being part of one of our committees. The commitment is usually pretty minimal, a few meetings a year. Some committees are a little busier in terms of monthly or quarterly meetings, but it's a really great way to have just have your voice be heard in the work of our board. And then I'll say one final thing. I believe Ms. Caballero is also a member of the Budget Advisory Committee, so I want to thank her for her continued service on that committee as she's resigning from the Bond Oversight Committee.
Yes, she is still a member of that committee. All right. Anything further, board members? Would you like to move the item?
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved by Ms. Ekstrom, seconded by Dr. Shaw. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you, Mrs. Miranda Carter, for staying on and for your service as well.
Thank you all.
Okay, now we are on to 6.5, Governing Board Policy ABB, Personal Privacy, Student, Staff, and Volunteers at Schools. Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah, President Luna Rose, board members, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ross. We have a second read on the district's personal privacy policy for students, staff, and volunteers, policy ABB.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Good evening, Board President Luna Rose, governing board members. This is the second read of a revision, small but important revision to policy ABB in this regarding audio and video recording at schools and school property. The clarification here would be that an administrator cannot approve their own request to record someone on campus. So that was the clarification that was in this revision. This was posted on August 27th for public comments. The comments are attached to the agenda item. Since this is a second read, it is eligible under the board's policy adoption, policy BG, for final approval or other action that the board may take.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Board members, questions? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. In the comments, classified staff member suggested that we change some of the wording to anyone instead of faculty. I know this policy is mainly about students, staff, volunteers at schools. Does it cover like parents or like contracted workers or anyone who may or may not be recorded?
Ms. Shaw, the policy applies to anyone on campus. Students, staff, visitors, contractors, board members, general counsel.
Okay.
I do see that
The language,
revision says specifically faculty, the version that was approved by the board at the first read.
And I'll say it says on here that no person present on the school district property shall do this following, so it does include everyone on our properties.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move the item.
I will second. Okay. Moved by Dr. Shaw, seconded by myself. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Ross, for being so quick. All right, so I do believe we are now at 7.1, lobbyist update, 2024 legislative wrap-up. Dr. Trujillo.
President Luna Rose, it's always a pleasure to welcome our wonderful lobbyist team from Tri-Advocates, Mr. John Kelly, Ms. Roxana Pitones here. They're going to give an overview of the 2024 legislative session, the session that was, and then maybe just a brief outlook of what to expect in 2025. So many unknowns in 2025, so we're excited to kind of hear what the forecast may be.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. President Luna Rose and members of the governing board, my name is John Kelly. I'm a principal with the lobbying firm Tri-Advocates. I'm joined by my colleague Roxana Pitones. I think this is your third visit? Second visit to the governing board. Always a pleasure to be down in Tucson. We have other business down here as well, so we're spending the night and looking for a good place to eat if you have recommendations. So yes, it's always fun talking about the legislative session 5 months after it's over, because we tried to forget it as soon as it was done. Unfortunately, we don't get to do that because we have to live with the consequences. What we're going to do for you tonight, just briefly going through the agenda, is a little bit, some of the highlights, some of the things you need to know about what happened, just a refresher course, because again, past is prologue, and you need to understand that piece as we think about what's happening next. Give you as much as we can. I think that's a broken crystal ball in the image there as to what we think is happening. Certainly there are issues that are rising that we need to know about and we need to get ahead of. We'll talk a little bit about the political landscape and some of the levers that, as we watch what happens on November 5th and the weeks to follow, how that's going to play out. But before I pass it to Roxana, I just want to call out that in order to do the work we do, we depend on your outstanding staff and the communication we have on a regular basis. And that includes Ricky, who you had at the podium, Rob, Dr. Trujillo, of course, Blaine and others on your team who are always so effective in giving us what we need to be your advocates with either the legislature, the governor's office, various state agencies, including but not limited to the Department of Education, other school districts with similar challenges, and other advocacy organizations, both advocates for education as well as for business, who are also consumers of the work that you do. So with that, we'll let Roxana give you the overview.
Good evening, Chair and board members. We wanted to sort of start the conversation by setting the stage with the dynamics that we have at play at the legislature. The graphic before you is one that I believe you've seen before, and these margins, these very tight one vote margins in the Senate and the House have been sort of our pattern in the last 3 cycles. But new to this sort of three-legged stool is obviously the governor and the divided government that we operate in. Certainly we had this session some themes that carried over from the 23 session, including some of the partisan nature that comes with having such a narrowly divided chambers, things that John and I used to take for granted, like agency continuations and the confirmation of agency directors are no longer things that are easily done or quickly done. And so certainly the legislature takes their time in using those items as leveraging tools for broader things. One thing that was very different this year than from the previous session was the state of our fiscal health and our fiscal picture at large. 23, we started with a surplus, lots of one-time projects and infrastructures that were granted out by the state. 2024, very different picture in January of this year when the state was facing approximately a $2 billion deficit between the then current fiscal year 24 and the upcoming fiscal year 25, which we're in now. And certainly appropriating dollars is, I think, a lot easier than making cuts, at least from a negotiating standpoint. And for a lot of the folks that are serving down at the Capitol, this was really their first experience in making cuts. And that's just by virtue of some of the nature of our turnover, and then our state just also hasn't been in a deficit in a long time. So that was sort of the dynamic at play. Next slide, please, John. Here's just a brief overview of some of our session stats. 160 days in session. We adjourned in mid-June. I think a worthy thing to highlight from these numbers is the number of legislative referrals that the legislature referred to the ballot for November, certainly top of mind for your constituency as they get their ballots in the mail. 11 of those measures that will be noted as the Prop 300s in their ballot are measures that were referred to by the legislature, and I think that's a bigger number than we typically see, and I think that's just something to point out to you as sort of a symptom of divided government, where referring something to the ballot really only requires a simple majority and doesn't require a governor's signature, and so we see the legislature sort of trying to skirt that veto by referring measures directly to voters. Next slide. Here is a overview of sort of the larger, broader package that passed as part of the budget. As I mentioned to you earlier, at the beginning of session, the state was facing a fiscal deficit. They reconciled a $1.4 billion shortfall by making cuts across the board with agencies, typically around 3.5% of operating funds to agencies were cut. The state also made some revisions to infrastructure projects by delaying them and delaying the year that they were funded in. We also saw a lot of cuts to higher ed, including universities and community colleges. I think that for the most part, K-12 was largely mitigated from harms, and there were a few areas where the state did make some shifts in funding, and those two are in that third bullet that is noted there, with district additional assistance and what we call the opportunity weight, which is additional support for districts serving free and reduced price lunch eligible students. Those two allocations were made for this fiscal year FY25. However, they were shifted to one-time funds as opposed to ongoing funds, which means that in the next upcoming fiscal year, those will be areas where certainly advocacy will be required in order to maintain those levels of funding and avoid a $66 million cut. A bright spot in this equation was the waiving of the aggregate expenditure limitation, which we've often seen used as a leveraging tool again for broader things. But we're glad to see that your district is able to expend monies that they are allocated without worrying about this AEL structure. $200 million to building renewal grants, which we know is increasingly needed with aging school buildings and maintenance that is required. But I would say in large, we feel that K-12 was in a better place than some of the other sectors that the state covers. And then to give you a broader picture of, the budget picture as a whole, as I mentioned to you, there were a number of cuts to universities and community colleges, as well as adult education programs that are managed by the Department of Education. A bright spot is even in a year of deficit, the legislature did make an allocation to the Housing Trust Fund, which continues to be an area of high need and bipartisan support. Kind of looking ahead into, what does our fiscal picture look like next? As Mr. Hernandez noted, last week, our state's top economist met to sort of talk about their projections for FY 2026 and what does our budget picture look like. And by all accounts, I think we are, as a state, in a better place than we were at this time last year. But certainly, there's limited availability of funds for new initiatives or any sort of new ongoing funding. The state largely budgets in a 3-year window, and when we look at that 3-year window in FY 28, I think there's like maybe $160 million in cash balance. And we look at all of the state agency funding requests and certainly all the needs in K-12, and that's probably just not sufficient to cover the areas without making drastic changes to spending priorities. But with that, I'll turn it over to John to talk about a TUSD specific priority that we got to work on this year.
For all that good news, I think it was about a year ago that we were in front of you, and Dr. Shaw, you brought up the issue of the settlement, litigation settlement funds, and asked us to work on that. And we worked with your team to put some language together, worked in coordination with other education stakeholders. There was Senator Ken Bennett, who's the Senate Education Chair, was particularly enthusiastic about this provision, put it in his Title 15 cleanup bill, which made it through the Senate and then stalled in the House due to both political and personality challenges. And as we were getting right to the last days of the session, it wasn't clear if that bill would actually move out or not, despite the fact that it was pretty popular and had been narrowed down to only 2 or 3 issues, including the litigation settlement issue. It was the night of the budget passing that we realized that that bill wasn't going to pass. We contacted Representative Gutierrez and asked for her assistance. She reached out to the House Appropriations Chair, Republican David Livingston, and you can see in this presentation they worked together to get the amendment added to the budget at the last of last minutes. And so we owe her and him a debt of gratitude for getting that done, and also to you for bringing that forward. So we're hoping that we will continue to get this kind of bipartisan victory on any other matters that we'll be looking forward to. But of course, we're depending on everybody coming back and what that's going to be like. What do we know? What do we not know? There's certainly a lot more we don't know than we do at the moment. We know the governor has articulated policy priorities related to early childhood development, as well as supporting the teaching profession. She's had work in those areas and wants to continue that work. We're tracking very closely the interest in either maintaining or hopefully expanding the Arizona Teachers Academy program, because that has worked well for a lot of entities. The number one education issue on the docket is extension of Prop 123, the State Land Trust fund utilization, since that expires last year. Mr. Hernandez talked about that extensively. So you can expect that over the course of the next 60 days, we'll see some discussions about what that proposal will look like. The governor is keeping her priorities close to her vest, but we know that we're in touch with some of our friends up there, and we'll be, Tucson Unified will have a seat at the table in terms of having a voice and describing where that priority will go. That would likely be taken up in a special session in the first month or so of the legislature, with intention to put it as a special ballot election, either in the spring, probably April or May, at the latest. For the most part, these kinds of funding issues, when they've been brought to special elections, have done well. When they've been on general election ballots, they have not done as well. And considering all the traffic on the ballot, as you've seen it in your ballot, it was probably a good idea to delay that. But it will definitely be a last-minute kind of exercise and very difficult. As Roxana pointed out, there were almost 2,000 bills introduced. Every year, I can fairly confidently say the highest percentage of bills that are introduced relate to K-12 education, everything having to do with mandating curriculum or prohibiting curriculum, having new administrative requirements and reports, and we can break some printers with all the administrative requirements, issues related to school safety, whether it's SROs or psychology, the tweaks to school finance, which may or may not include DSEG, graduation requirements, testing, tweaks to that whole regime. And now the new issue that I've been hearing more and more about, banning of cell phones. We'll see a proposal probably come forward from the State Superintendent of Public Instruction on that issue. I read about it on my cell phone, by the way. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the state fiscal climate. We see the universities first in line in standing up and saying that they need help. They've been experiencing a great deal of pain. You're familiar with that situation with U of A. ASU is now closing a campus. They're adding a surcharge on tuition. So they're getting a lot of attention, not necessarily all positive, about the needs that they're having to come to the legislature for. And there are so many others that are out there. First things first is going to be pursuing legislation to increase taxation on other tobacco-related products, including vaping, to potentially build up their trust fund. They're anticipating that their current funding source, which is taxation of cigarettes, is declining, and so they want to beef that up to enhance early childhood health and education activities, and so that's going to be a new proposal. And finally, just let's talk a little bit about the fiscal climate. And as Roxana said, it's better but not great, and it's not likely to be great anytime really soon, although it looks like the economy is heading toward a soft landing. It's not necessarily taking off, although the economy up in the greater Phoenix area with chip plants and battery plants, and I know you have some of that going on down here, could have long-term beneficial impacts, but within the window of what we look at, it's not there. The power dynamics of the legislature are all dependent on the majority. And as Roxana explained, it's been bare majorities for Republicans for a number of years. There is I wish I could tell you I knew what the margin's going to be. I don't know what the margin is going to be. One of the more likely scenarios, which sort of keeps us up at night, it's kind of interesting, but it keeps us up at night, is the 15-15 Senate, which would be a power sharing arrangement. So not just divided government, but divided government, which would force some sharing. Sharing is a learned behavior. It's not come naturally in the legislative process. So we anticipate that things will grind fairly slowly if that's the case. Is that going to happen? We don't know. But every indication are from unreliable polls is that almost all the races that we're looking at are going to be very, very tight. And even the ones where we talk leaning Republican or leaning Democrats, even some of those are going to be very tight. So it's just going to be one of those years where we'll be staying up for election night and probably a few nights after that. Just to give you the bigger context, water supply continues to be a major challenge for the state. The governor vetoed a number of proposals. They're still negotiating some issues relating to water. Affordable housing certainly continues to be a major challenge for most of our communities. We have a number of issues relating to elections and propositions. I just want to call out this issue of sending legislation to the ballot to avoid a governor's veto pen or potential veto pen. A lot of that is just political poetry to send signals to political fans of one side or the other. But these are all voter protected, so they're permanent unless they're changed at the ballot. So exercise, and I advise my family this, exercise a great deal of due care as you review these ballot propositions. There's a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence. There's a study committee looking at different issues relating to that. But considering in I think California, there were 700 bills introduced in the California legislature relating to artificial intelligence, I can guarantee you there's going to be something related to artificial intelligence and education that we'll be seeing in the year ahead. And finally, as I said, all the tin cups are out and everybody wants their money back that the legislature had to take away. There is still a significant rainy day fund balance that the legislature could at least partially tap into at least one time. There has been no appetite for that so far, but it's important to remember there is that fund balance. And finally, Roxanne already covered most of these. As I said, the Voter Protection Act makes these things semi-permanent. And so a lot of care, I just discovered provisions in one proposition. I couldn't believe that the legislature passed it. That if you take a refund on your property tax because the city hasn't done enough to protect your property values from public nuisances or other things, but if you take that refund, you waive your private property rights in terms of what the government can do to your property. There's so many different lines of statute that you have to pay attention to, and the summaries, if you go through that Secretary of State handbook that was mailed to you, I strongly recommend it because even I'm seeing stuff that we never saw before. And good luck getting through the judges list and all the legislators in the Senate. I think I'm recommending to a lot of my friends to vote backwards, start at the back of the ballot, because it gets more interesting as you go. So start with the hard stuff and then end up with the presidential election, I guess. And as you know, there's so much money coming into Arizona from other sources. Arizona is one of the political epicenters. There's so much attention being paid. And we already have, as Roxana points out, these 16 districts lean Republican, 10 districts lean Democrat. We have 4 purely Democrat competitive districts, but I can tell you way more than that are competitive. So we are definitely anticipating interesting times, and that is also a curse. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you have or attempt to or pretend to.
All right. Thank you so much, John and Roxana, for your presentation. I would like to echo, starting in the back, down ballot candidates are very important. And that's all I will allude to that there. Board members, any questions? Ms. Ekstrom.
Hi, thank you for being here. Is there any talk about a permanent solution to the AEL?
President Luna Rose, Member Ekstrom, there's discussion about it, and there's been discussion about maybe adjusting the CPI that was originally attached to it. That could extend it maybe for several years. That would be a semi-permanent or longer temporary solution. There's discussion about maybe tying that into the Prop 123, but we haven't seen that laid out. There's certainly discussions.
Okay, and then you talked about early childhood education and that being a priority. Any discussion about funding full-day kindergarten?
Member Ekstrom, I haven't heard anything lately about that, no.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of discussion about restoring the opportunity weight and restoring some of the other funding that is made one time first, because those are hard fought and they're trying to keep those back in.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Shaw.
Thank you, President Luna Rose, and thanks for coming down from Phoenix and giving the presentation. You know, when I saw the presentation a few days ago, that was the first I heard that our proposal for how we use settlement funds had actually passed. And so I wish there was more fanfare about it, because this was a big deal for our district. So that was really great news to see that. And thank you, Nancy Gutierrez. She is a TUSD teacher at Tucson High School, who's also a state representative. So thank you to her to taking the lead and getting that through. And this is going to make a huge difference to the substance use task force and the work that we're going to be doing to use our settlement funds to really impact mental health and substance use reduction and other things that we're going to be using these funds for here in our district. So thank you for your advocacy on this, and thank you, Representative Burke Gutierrez, for getting that across the finish line.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you for your presentation. This is some exciting stuff, and yeah, I'm happy to see what Ms. Gutierrez and Mr. Livingston, I believe his name was, were able to do. I have some possible suggestions of things to maybe try to advocate for, if I may. A staff member reached out to me about a loss in her family, her nephew, who was involved in a car accident. He was a passenger. And she asked if there was anything that we can do to require drivers instruction at the, at the school level, or maybe there's like the Department of Motor Vehicles. I don't know what agency it would be, to try to get like this issue taken care of. I know when I got my driver's license, I had like little to no instruction on how to drive, and like tips that could have helped, because I was involved in like 3 car accidents in high school. They weren't my fault though, and I think that's common with a lot of young people. It's like you may be a super safe driver, but if you're in the vehicle with your friends and like they don't have that care that you do, then something terrible can happen. And so she mentioned that her nephew was a great driver, and that he had taken driver's instruction courses through TPD, and so I don't know if like other agencies around the state have similar things, or if driver's instruction was ever like a thing at the K-12 level. But I certainly would love to look into that and see what we can do as a school district to require some sort of driver's instruction. But I think it's also bigger than that. Like if people who got licenses were required to go through that, like especially if they're like under a certain age, I think it would really help our roads, save lives, and save money for like police having to go out to accidents. Do you think that's something you can advocate for?
Member Shaw, we'd certainly be happy to take a look at that. It falls into the category of really good ideas where the legislature could tell school districts to do it, but they probably won't give you any funding to execute on it. So we have to be cautious about those kinds of things. They're really good ideas. They improve safety. And there may be other ways to solve those kinds of problems. But yes, we're certainly interested in looking for any way to improve and protect the safety of both staff and students on the districts. But that's something that the School Boards Association and the School Administrators Association tend to get a lot of those kinds of bills on their list of things to work on.
Right. Yeah, because I was thinking like, when they required now for graduation is to take the like citizenship test basically. Right. And that's like a low number. It's just like a test. And so there's not really any infrastructure involved. But yeah, maybe we can see what we can do. I don't know if our CTE department can take that. But let me know if there's anything else that we can do for that. And I appreciate you looking into the issue. Also, when I was at Pueblo last month, I believe, for the Running and Winning event, a student had mentioned to me that the Arizona universities don't accept financial literacy when they apply for those colleges, and that's something that we accept for graduation is financial literacy. And so a lot of students were taken aback that, that wasn't accepted, and then they had to take a course. And so I don't know if you can advocate for that with the Board of Regents.
So, Member Shaw, is that as an admission requirement? They won't accept it as an admission requirement?
Yes,
so
that's what she told me.
Like a math requirement?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but we accept it for graduation requirement, so it's terrible.
I think there's some great, I don't know about specifically financial literacy, but I know there's some issues around computer science and other classes that a lot of high schools offer that universities don't necessarily have it articulated in the same way. Same with community colleges. There's definitely work to be done. I have a personal passion for that issue because as my children grew up in the system, and they would take either dual enrollment or different classes, and they would find out afterwards and be surprised what was and wasn't acceptable, or what was and wasn't credited. I think there's some work to be done in the customer service side of that articulation of credits between the sectors. So I thank you for bringing that forward.
Of course.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your work.
Yes, Mr. Ross.
Thank you. I hate to interrupt, but that's a very good point, because we're actually required to have financial literacy in Title 15. So there's a disconnect between our own higher ed and K-12. So.
Yeah.
It's not the only one.
Gosh. Thank you for mentioning that, because I think like they were considering dropping the course because so many students were coming into that obstacle. And so I hope like they still have the course if it's indeed required. Thanks for mentioning that, Ms. Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And
Thank you.
appreciate you coming down. Okay, we are on to 7.2, FY 2025 Digital Budget Book Presentation for Tucson Unified School District. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, I'd like to welcome our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Hernandez, back to the podium to just do an overview and a demo of the new digital format for the district's budget book. I know he had done a brief demo for the audit committee, I think at its last meeting, and now he's going to do one for the general public. It is a neat tool to be able to run a lot of different customizable reports online without the old format of going through the records office and requesting reports. Governing board members, you're always available to request information directly from the administration that doesn't necessarily come from the digital budget book. I mean, we would, as we do often, we'll run reports for you, directly out of like Visions, upon request. With that, I'll turn it over to Ricky.
Okay, hello again. So yeah, this is the first year that we've implemented a digital budget book. We publish a budget book every fiscal year. This has been a common practice in the district back when I first started in 2003. Just to kind of give you a really high level of what it was. In 2014, our budget book was 164 pages. It was designed in Excel. It had pie charts from Excel. It was printed in a 3-inch 3-ring binder. And we printed a lot of those. I think I have a few of them. Some of them are holding up my air conditioning unit as we speak. So, I mean, they're out there. They exist. In fiscal year 22, our budget book was 341 pages, also designed with Excel, had no visuals, provided a lot of line item detail over 3 years for every site and major fund. The end. That's all it did. This year, we're going all digital. With visuals, we're providing some summaries, some line item detail. We're looking at every fund, and we're looking across 3 fiscal years. We can look up to 5 if we want to, but it's just going to make it lengthier. I did print the entire book. It is 2,221 pages long if you really want to print it out. So it is possible to print the whole thing because I did it. So this is what it looked like last year. This is the chart. This is Utterback. Didn't really tell you much. I mean, here's what we spent in M&O and DSEG and title and other funding, for all of these different categories of expenses. It didn't, it just told you exactly what's there. It didn't really tell you much more than that. So now what we're doing is we're leveraging the financial data from Visions, from our ERP. So all of the data that is used, that lives in our financial management system, we're using that to create a more robust, more transparent budget book. Something that's easily templated with text that includes some charts, some images, other layouts. It's a full collaborative document across the organization. This is fed by, all of our departments, all of our schools. It can be viewed on your desktop, on your mobile, and like I said, you can print it if that's what you want to do. One of the great things about this, especially this day and age, is you can share any of the pages on social media. So if you click on the little Facebook or X link, or formerly Twitter, on any one of the pages that has those little icons, it will automatically let you take that page, lift it, and share it on your Facebook page or your Twitter account. That's it so far. As they roll it out, this may Instagram, I don't know. I don't know that this is Instagrammable kind of stuff. I don't think anybody wants to look this on Insta. So now this budget book meets or exceeds the criteria for budget awards from GFOA and from ASBO International. So I took the criteria, or ClearGov provided me the criteria for the Government Finance Officers Association on what they look at their Meritorious Budget Award and the ASBO International Distinguished Budget Award, and what is the criteria that they're looking for. It meets, and in some instances exceeds the criteria. This is, when you go to our page, you see the faces of some of our graduates. This is the first thing that you will see when you go to our budget book. And I'm just going to kind of talk through some screenshots, and then I'll take any questions that you may have and address some of the concerns that have been provided to you as well. So this is the first page that you will see. Like I mentioned, if you look in that upper right-hand corner, if you wanted to share Dr. Trujillo's face and his budget transmittal letter on your Facebook, you can certainly do that by clicking on that Facebook link. There are introduction elements that are now part of this budget book. We didn't have these before. People didn't know how many kids we have, how many of them are economically disadvantaged, how many of them are ELLs, how many of them are special ed. If you click on any one of those links, you'll get information about the district. Something as basic as the history of the district is something that we pride ourselves on being, over 150 years old, and we publish that everywhere. It's never been part of a budget document. And that's something that should be the basis for a budget is a value system. It's a statement of values, and obviously we've got a lot of history behind that. So it provides a lot of introductory elements. It provides a lot of comprehensive funding information for all the different types of funds, including a fund that isn't considered one of the funds that we normally publish and enact for. I put DSEG in here since that is one of the big ones that we talk about. But it provides a graphic representation. You can take these pie charts apart if you wanted to. If you wanted to see what those segments look like, what those dollars look like, there is detail behind all of these, and there are breakdowns that you can look at. So there is comprehensive funding information that you couldn't see before. There is now revenue information. People didn't, we talk about a budget. A budget really talks about the expenditure side of the equation and not really the revenue side of the equation. Well, now you can take a look at revenues, what we've received over the last several years. You'll take a look at some estimates. A lot of these are estimates, especially on the local sources, because a lot of it is collected through property taxes in particular. And property taxes, our deficiency rate is anywhere between 3% and 5%. So those are based on estimates based on our levies. But now you can take a look at what are the funding sources locally, state, federally, other things that fund Tucson Unified School District's budget. This is an element that didn't exist in those old budget books. Staffing information. So you can take a look at staffing overview, positions by the function, DSEG staffing. You can take a look at school and department staffing. Now, one thing I did provide is there are attachments on some of these where there is detail that I felt was important, but couldn't be replicated by the budget book system. So it's available for a download, so you can take a look at that 3-year staffing summary. But if you want to take a look at that 21st century school improvement and what those positions are, you click on that download that's attached to it, and you can see it. You can see the historical components of it and what the positions are. So it breaks it down as far as possible, because we didn't provide you this before. We didn't give you this level of detail on staffing. Department and schools budget. So now you can see, a budget for every single department, every single one of our schools. You'll see every one of our principals' shining faces. This is my favorite school because this is my son's school, Drachman. So you see Dr. Jesus Celaya's face. You will see every principal's face. Their expenditure summary for the last fiscal, several years. You can drill down into it, and what does that make, what is made up of that. So you can take a look at that, the fact that he's got a general fund amount of X, a non-major fund of Y, a special projects fund of Z, and what those are. What are the actuals for those years? What are the budgeted years? What is the difference for each one of those? That's broken down for every single budget at every single school in every single department. Period. We didn't do that. We do that now. And you get a graphic representation that is easily consumable. we get so caught up on the how much instruction and support and administration and so on. Well, now you can see it on a school by school, department by department level. So again, this is Drachman. They spend well over, I think that's a 50 something percent on instruction. And you can see every one of the categories going down. You'll be able to see that level of bar chart as well as the detail on below it, so that you can look at every department, every school with a graphic representation. So more transparency, more detail, more information. Like I mentioned before, you can share any of these pages on social media. You click on that Facebook, it'll pop up with the Facebook page. If you're already logged in, it'll share it on there. So if this makes your heart happy, please hit the social media button. Just make sure you tag us when you do. And then they're sharing old school. People still like paper. People still like to print things out. We in the board agenda item, we posted the instructions on how you go about doing that. And Ms. Shaw talked about how you did that. You went there, you hit the print button, you selected what you wanted to print. You got on number 4, you got a confirmation that, hey, we received your request. And then on number 5, you get an email afterwards with a link that says, hey, your stuff is ready. You click on the link and it will open up the download of whatever you wanted. So in this case, I wanted, the Drachman budget. It sent me an email, and then a few minutes later, it sent me another email. Now, if you print the entire thing, it's gonna take some time. If you try to print the entire thing, it will crash. I'll be honest with you. It is an extensive document. It is not, I understand that we want to provide the ability for people to print this out. It is not necessarily, the digital budget book is not meant to be consumed on paper. I know some people want to do that. If people want to do that, it is possible to print the whole thing out. You have to print it in segments. This is not this is not a TUSD issue. That is not a finance issue. We are not incompetent at doing this. These are some of the comments that unfortunately my staff have received about their competency, about we're doing something wrong. No. What this is we have a system that unfortunately cannot handle the capacity. We are the only school district in Arizona that is using digital budget book. No other school district in Arizona uses this. So yes, there may be kinks. I welcome any feedback. I welcome any questions. If you think that we need less, we'll do less. If you want to be less transparent and less detail, we'll take detail down. If you want more detail, we can figure out how to put more of it. But to suggest that we're trying to prevent people from accessing this because they can't print it is just not correct. So I just want to make sure that is loud and clear, because my staff and I spent 4 months working on this. This is a project that took a long time to ensure that we manifest transparency as we've committed to doing so. With that, I will take your questions.
Dr. Trujillo.
Ricky, can you address we were provided with a printout. Obviously, there's a report you can run expenditure by location, and it states that 56% of our budget allocations are going to departments, kind of creating the impression that it might just be flowing into 1010. Can you communicate publicly here about what that 56.5% encompasses in terms of student-facing services?
Yeah, so departments receive funds that are then allocated out to schools. So they are budgeted centrally, but spent locally at the schools. Utilities, for example. You'll see a budget in the Utilities and Energy Department on the budget book of $26 million, but you won't see any expenses for the last several years. Why? Because we track spend on power, water, garbage at the site level. That's what you want us to tell you. You want us to tell you how much is being spent at Lineweaver, at Rincon, for electricity, for garbage, for whatever the case may be. You don't want to know how much you're spending centrally. We can tell you that too, but that's not how we break down the budget. The Language Acquisition Department, for example, we allocate to them $14 million. They don't have $14 million worth of people sitting centrally at LERC. We have ELD and we have two-way dual language teachers sitting in classrooms that are funded by the department sitting in classrooms. We do that with XED. We do that. Transportation is a huge component of that. Food services is a huge component of that. The counseling department, the counselors that are not sitting at schools are a huge component in that. So the suggestion, or the theory that all this money is being allocated centrally and spent centrally, no. It's allocated centrally because that's how we allocate it, but it's spent at the sites. If that chart mimicked what I showed you in the classroom spending report, you would see classroom instruction in the 20s. I mean, that's how it worked, but it's not. And I invite you to take a look at, like I said, the utilities example. Go look at Drachman and you'll see a line item for electricity with no budget, but they've expensed. Why? Because that's where the expenditures happen. They don't happen centrally. So.
Thank you. Ms. Ekstrom.
Thank you. I appreciate this and, people being able to run reports and such, but let's say you have a tata who's 70, he's going to be 77 years old, or he is 77 years old.
So let's not say you have a tata who's 77
Well, no,
years old.
my daughter has a tata who's 77
Okay.
years old. Technology is not his forte, but budgets may be. What are we doing for those individuals? Because some people don't even know how to use a QR code. People aren't going to be on here, trying to figure out how to run reports. What are we doing for those types of people? People who don't have access to technology. How are we addressing that?
So one of the primary ways that that can be addressed is by just reaching out to us directly. We're not printing these. We have, even in the last several years, even my predecessor, we didn't print these en masse. These weren't like printed and then sitting at school campuses for people to peruse. What I would suggest is for people to reach out to the finance department, and we can print one out, and if somebody wants to pick it up, we'll snail mail it to you, we'll email it to you. If somebody wants to take a look at a school, a set of schools, a set of departments, like Dr. Trujillo mentioned, that information is available not just through Budget Book, but through other sources that are not part of the Budget Book. So yeah, for that 77-year-old tata, he can have a copy of whatever he wants if he wants to just hold it in his two hands and be able to peruse it that way.
And I think we have to recognize people don't have access to technology. They are using their phones, and it's not very user friendly if you're not doing it every day. So if that's the solution, that people can call the finance department and have reports run, then I think that's okay. But as far as having like a 2,000-page budget book, I mean, maybe you would print one and have it available for people to look through at site. I don't know.
I mean, we can always print anything if that's the direction that the board wants to go. We can print those out and leave them at schools. And then, we'd have to we can make one available at every campus, because we can't say, well, they may need one, but not them.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying every campus, maybe have it at a couple of different locations, maybe 1010 and, somewhere else.
Yeah, we can do that.
That's accessible to people.
Yeah.
Different parts of town,
Yeah, like the ones that come to my mind right away is not just 1010, but the family centers. We can put one at every family center if somebody wants to sit down and open it up and go through it.
I think that's a great compromise. And then the ability for people to call
and
the
then they
finance
can always
department.
call if they want more info, for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I do have a question.
Yeah.
So we're the only district that's using this?
We're the only district in Arizona that's using this. Municipalities are using it. The city of Tucson is going to start to use it for their budget book. I know the city of Flagstaff uses it. I believe Yuma is using it as well. But there is no other school district in Arizona that is currently using this digital budget book. So we're definitely a model for other school districts in the state.
And has anybody reached out to?
I have had other school districts. I've had colleagues in Tucson reach out to me about it, and other colleagues across the state who've reached out about it, just inquiring. Like I said, the digital budget book allows you to be as extensive or as overview as much as you want. So if a rural school district just wants to put a higher level type thing together, they can certainly do that.
So, because I appreciate Ms. Ekstrom's question, because I myself, I hate paper, I hate printing stuff out, and I like everything digital. But Lily's 72-year-old Nana is not going to want to, she might look at it online, but if she wants to, print it out, then she's going to want to be able to have that, page or whatever. So to that end, what about, and I know we don't see it here, but any of our families who are looking for bilingual?
So we haven't produced it in Spanish. That's certainly something that isn't, like I said, this is the first of, I hope, many. So we haven't translated it into not only Spanish, but any of the other languages. That's something that will certainly take some time to do. We can do that. We can produce it into other languages. At that point, we'd have to PDF every single one of those, right? Like we'd have to produce multiple copies that would have to be in the form of PDF. So it's not that we haven't, it's not that we don't want to, it's just that we haven't. I guess, like I said, this is the first year of this digital budget book that we've ever had. But coming from a bilingual family, I can tell you that I think having it in Spanish is certainly, in particular Spanish, I think is important.
I think so too. Okay, thank you. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you for explaining this a bit more. So you mentioned that you use the financial data from iVisions to compile all this. Were you using artificial intelligence?
No.
No. Okay, so is that why it took you 4 months to finish?
Yeah, the only, I guess you can say, artificial intelligence, so one thing you don't see is there is an entire repository of data that we put in all our financial data, and that creates, AI, it creates the charts,
right?
Right? Because it reads from that data. But no, it's not an AI-based product.
Okay, and so can we expect that your department will spend 4 months out of every fiscal year to produce this?
No. No. This is the first year. This is why we spent 4 months. So like I mentioned before, in future years, it's a matter of taking the data and updating the data. It will re-up all of those charts, all of those graphs. Everything that I've shown you will then be updated automatically once new data is fed into it. So we spent 4 months this year because this is the first time ever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in your presentation, I just clicked the link when you started your presentation, and it hasn't loaded yet. I don't know if it's TUSD Wi-Fi. I don't know. But in your presentation, we're seeing screenshots of different areas of the digital budget book.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are listing percentages instead of dollar amounts. And I see a couple of them have the spreadsheet breakdown listed next to it. I imagine you have to click on.
You can hover and click on the actual chart. It will provide you the dollar representation for that percentage.
Okay, I don't think I noticed that. Maybe if we have a key on these things, showing people that if they hover on any of these graphics, that it will produce more detail.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful. I appreciate the suggestions that my colleagues have already made about it being translated and making it as accessible as possible. I do agree. But I do wonder, it's so easy on the budget book and all the other very large spreadsheets to just press Command F and then go directly to a school that I'm looking for. You know what I mean? Would it be difficult to do both the digital budget book and then the old school method, how we had it before?
It wouldn't be difficult. I think it would be repetitive to the point of just, it would be inefficient is the word I would use. It would be inefficient for us to do that simply because we're trying to be more transparent. And the attempt by the digital budget book is to provide it more detail than what the old PDF used to do. That PDF didn't really do anything. Nobody ever asked for it. People would download it at their leisure and read it and look at it, get some questions, and and maybe come up here and kind of rattle off some things. But nobody really would engage with the budget book. And that's what we want. We want this to be a tool for engagement for the community, especially considering that we've got $480 million in bond funding that is going to flow through this district. And one of the commitments that we made to this community was to be more transparent. And so this is a tool to increase transparency. And so that was our attempt is to kind of behind the rallying cry that we hear from the 5 of you, which is to be more transparent and provide more information, is to do this. Doing it the other way for me feels like going backwards.
Well, I have to disagree because the budget book was what we have used historically, what every school district has used. And in the case of Lillian Fox, I'm sure it's the budget book that she used when she found that our district was misusing 301 money, and she saved the teachers millions of dollars. So I think it would be helpful to have both for those who may not be as savvy with technology and may just be more familiar with the spreadsheet model instead of clicking around and trying to find things. I'm glad you mentioned that the city of Tucson has used this, because I remember trying to figure out their budget and I did have a hard time with it. And like I said, I'm still trying to load this the clear.gov doc on my computer.
The one compromise I guess that I would ask is sort of what Ms. Ekstrom mentioned, is we can create the PDF of the digital one and have it available for anybody to look at if that's really what people want to do. It gives you the same level of information as the old, less transparent one.
Well, I mean, a 2,000 plus page document, it's not going to be the same as a 300 page. You know what I mean? One, you can't look at it on your phone. You can't download it on a regular computer. You might crash your computer to download something that massive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Hernandez? Okay. Well, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, I'm still here for the next one.
Oh, yes, you are. Okay, 7.3, school year 24-25, performance and visual arts staffing report for TUSD schools.
Yeah, I think it's no secret that all 5 of you publicly in a variety of settings, most notably here in several meetings, have voiced your unquestioned commitment and passion for expanding the arts, visual, and performance in all of our TUSD schools. And you did request just sort of an overview of staffing allocations for fine arts inside of our K-8 schools. What I want to be clear is this isn't, there's really 2 when we think about the arts, particularly the performance, the visual, and the fine arts. We have 2 categories of staffing allocations. You have those that occur through OMA, and OMA is separate from those staffing allocations that occur through the regular district budget or through Proposition 301 Classroom Site Fund, which we've used to add good old-fashioned art and music teachers in recent years. So tonight's presentation, though we are going to reference some OMA allocations when we go school by school, we're going to focus on what the district's M&O budget is providing to schools in the form of visual, performance, and fine arts staffing. Mr. Hernandez?
Yeah. So like Dr. Trujillo mentioned, there's an attachment with the BAI that actually breaks down all the school level funding so that you can take a look at every single school and kind of what those allocations look like in terms of staff. I asked, she's still here? She's still here. Dr. Ashcraft to hang around because there's information in here that really is, she is the subject matter expert behind these allocations. Really, I'm going to talk to you about numbers. So Currently, there are 4 primary funding sources for our fine arts positions: M&O, DSEG, our Title IV, which is our a federal grant, and our Classroom Site Fund. They fund 3 different types of positions across the fine arts programs in K-5 and K-8s. So you've got OMA Arts Integration Specialists, you've got fine arts teachers, and then you have OMA Design Team Artists. The design team artists are non-certified. They're classified positions, but they also provide fine arts support to our campuses. So there currently is no funding formula. We don't have a specific funding formula or ratio like we have for other positions for fine arts teaching positions. Now, schools may fund fine arts positions from within their current allocation of FTEs. In fact, we have schools who do so, and I provided you a listing of those. Now, we have to recognize that not only do fine arts provide, as an integral part of the regular curriculum, but it allows schools to establish PLCs at the schools, right? Because then that way core content teachers can spend their time in their professional learning communities on their campuses if students are participating in a fine art elective, for example. Now, there are positions that are created by the sites. By sites, we have 8 of them. Now, not every school has a full-time dedicated position. So approximately about 1/3 of the positions we've got in fine arts are shared among 2 or more schools. So, that's just a matter of capacity while also ensuring that we have fine arts programming at every single school. The cost to bring every one of those to a full-time would be an additional $4.2 million. So we'd have to find $4.2 million more in order to then bring one position in K-5 and K-8 only to a full-time. Now, all of the central funding is determined by annually by the Fine Arts Department. It's one of those examples that I mentioned in my prior presentation. The funds and the FTEs are allocated to Dr. Ashcraft's department, and then she works on allocating those out to the campuses, and then the campuses then work on those. I can't speak to how that process works. Dr. Ashcraft would be the expert behind how she and her team determine who goes where. Schools can also use tax credit funds for non-credit after-school fine arts positions. That happens quite a bit, particularly in the middle and high schools. But tax credit is also another funding source. Usually it's supplemental to everything else. So it's usually not to provide a fine arts class in the middle of the school day for credit. It has to be a non-credit after-school position. So here's the funding breakdown. Most of our positions are actually living in DSEG and in the Classroom Site Fund. Those are the 2 primary sources of funding that support fine arts. Most of the positions are divided equally, basically, between OMA Arts Integration Specialist and fine arts teachers. So certified staff members are providing fine arts instruction to students. And we have a variety of those FTEs, but like I said, most of them are DSEG and Classroom Site, or Prop 301, which is commonly what it's known as. So about over $6.6 million, about 98 FTE all told across the district. This is a breakdown just of position allocations when you take out the OMA position. So when you just have the non-OMA positions, I broke it down in a way that I hope is, you would understand, and then by region, because I know you want to know like east side versus west side, central versus non, and where kind of those positions are. They're mostly divided between the west side and central. Region 2, which is, kind of right here around the Tucson High area, kind of Park and 22nd area. And then Region 3 is around this area right here. Actually, it's a little west of here. But really, it's Region 4 and Region 1 who that receive the majority of the position allocations. So you can see what those look like. Most of those positions are less than a half FTE. So because they're shared amongst multiple schools. Now, when you include all of the OMA positions, they stay about the same. So about 69 schools, most of them in Region 1 and in Region 4, so far west side and Midtown. Region 5 is right behind there. Region 2, which is kind of, the Tucson High, Drachman area, CE Rose, that part of town, those receive the least among all of them when you actually take a look at the number of positions, but most of them in this area are either at least 1 FTE, but up to 1.5 FTE. So most of these positions are full-time once you actually account for the OMA jobs. There are other finance positions out there. As I mentioned before, there are 8 schools that fund their own fine arts positions. These are the 8 schools. Now, the schools that are marked with an asterisk do receive additional supplemental funds from the Fine Arts Department to provide other fine arts courses or instruction at those campuses. But ultimately, these 8 schools are funding a full-time FTE out of their own funding, be they DSEG or M&O. And that is it. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Ekstrom.
So here you have the fine arts positions that are funded by their own school: Borton, Carrillo, Davis, Trackman, Holiday, Pueblo Gardens, Roberts Naylor, and C.E. Rose. But on the other report, it says Carrillo, Davis, Holiday, Monzo, Pueblo Gardens, Trackman, C.E. Rose, Borton, and Roberts Naylor. So what's the difference? They're not the same.
The ones that are marked here, so some of these do receive some funding, like I mentioned. Some of these receive some supplemental funding from Fine Arts. So they may fund a full position, but they do receive additional funding, usually like a 0.1 FTE for additional support at those individual campuses.
Okay, so let's take Monzo, for example. They have a 0.3 FTE with OMA and then a 0.3 FTE without OMA. Can you explain to me what that means?
A 0.3 FTE with OMA?
Mm-hmm.
That would mean, I'm trying to think what they're using it for.
I mean, is it only for certain grades, like 4th and 5th grade, or is it for all grades? Are they all getting the
I'll have
instruction?
Dr. Ashcraft talk to you about that one.
Okay, great.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, President Luna Rose and board members, Dr. Trujillo and Councilman Ross. If we're talking about Monzo specifically, every elementary school receives 4th grade violin for their students, and in 5th grade we start band and also introduce all the orchestra instruments to them. So that's the case. The 0.3 represents the band and orchestra for Monzo. The other portion is an itinerant person who comes in to do the arts integration or the OMA part.
Okay, so every grade receives that.
Receives the OMA.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it depends on the size of the school. If
we're talking about Monzo. Let's just make it easy.
Yeah. So that the 0.3 goes for the OMA instruction, in that case, for the primary grades.
Okay, so K through 3rd get
the OMA arts integration.
Okay, and then 4th and 5th get the
instrumental music.
Instrumental,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Part of it is a scheduling issue too, to find the time.
Okay. I guess that's a little confusing because other schools find the time. So is it just, how is that all decided?
All of the, well, first of all, let me talk about the band and orchestra piece.
Okay.
Many of our schools do, all of the 4th grade children have the OMA instrumental portion. So the violin in 4th grade, all the classrooms come to it at different times.
Right.
And then 5th grade band or orchestra, the children choose. Other schools just choose to do what we call the pull-out model, where only kids that respond, they want to learn to play the violin, go. There's a sort of philosophy difference. I would love to have all the children study, but that's really determined by the school and what time they can afford for it.
Okay.
So Monzo is a case. In their case, for years they were connected to the School of Music at the University of Arizona, and they had their own program. So in that case, we didn't provide much OMA instruction for them.
Okay. Okay. So I guess if we're doing a pull-out method, then not every child is receiving, these fine arts components. So for me, I don't like that.
I don't either.
Yeah. So how do we change that?
Besides money, we are very careful the way we schedule. It's a formula-based.
I mean, sure, like my daughter wouldn't raise her hand. She doesn't want to learn the violin, but, she should learn the violin because her peers are learning the violin. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I certainly know what you're saying, yes.
Okay.
And it's a matter of staffing, having enough time.
Okay.
For everybody. It's specifically hard on our instrumental people. Most of them serve at a base school, middle school, and then several feeder elementary schools.
Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have for right now.
Thank you. Ms. Shaw.
Thanks for bringing that up, Ms. Ekstrom. It would be great if we can, make things more equitable in our district. I know there was a dollar amount. I think it was $4.2 million to get a full-time staff, our teacher at every K5 and K8, right? 4.2. Because, as we've discovered, not every student is going to decide to go into a band or orchestra in the 4th and 5th grade. And even that, even though those younger students may have access to an OMA teacher, it's just not the ideal thing, I think. And I know a lot of us here were privileged enough to have our children at a school that had really strong fine arts. I was under the impression with how we used our ESSER funds to purchase all those recorders that every school in our district had instruction in 3rd grade to learn music through the recorder. Is that still happening?
Ms. Shaw, yes, it is happening. Additionally, we've added ukulele to that because that's now the new instrument that's very popular. But yes, they have that ability. We provide the recorders for them and the method book that we developed at your recommendation.
Oh, good. With Ms. Fields?
Yes.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, so every school, every K5 or K8 school in 3rd grade students are getting music instruction and learning how to read music.
I want to talk to you about those schools where we've been able to add visual arts. And sometimes that takes the priority over the music portion, just based on who we've been able to hire. We've totally bled the universities dry of all the music people. I still have 2 positions open that we're trying to fill in December. So then, of course, we wanted to provide more visual arts because that's also important. So we went and were able to hire some people out of visual arts. So some of our OMA people are visual arts. They're almost half and half now.
Is there any, I went to school at the University for Art, and I think the School of Art probably had more students than the School of Music, but I can't recall. So if there's a lack of music teachers, because it's lower, I guess it's just reading music, that could we train a visual arts teacher to teach music?
We have that happening at Hudlow, for instance, with a visual arts teacher there. She's teaching the recorder. We have that happening at Sam Hughes. She's teaching band, orchestra, and OMA. So we have people that are multiple trained, and we're trying to do more of that through our professional development. Not to mention mariachi too. We're trying to increase that.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Trujillo.
Just try to, more for the people watching. I want to try to paint an easier picture because it can get a little complicated here. So when you put the OMA allocations into the mix, we are looking at a total of 11 schools that I would say are priority. That you have 11 schools where you have less than half time assigned to that school, which only allows them to maybe work with 1 grade level if they're lucky, a couple of days a week. That to me would be the situation with those 11 schools. Is that accurate? Can you speak to the frequency in which students that are receiving in these 11 schools, these half-time people, what's the frequency in which a K5 all 5 grade levels would even have access to that part-time music or visual arts teacher?
Okay. We have 45 OMA Arts Integration Specialists now. 2/3 of them are performing arts.
Okay.
The other third, visual arts. And there are a lot more than 11 schools that have full-time OMA Arts Integration Specialists in them.
So if you can pull up the positional allocations, I want to make sure we're going off of the same. Yeah. So I'm looking here, Dr. Ashcraft, at the very bottom, right, where we have 11 schools that actually have allocated to them less than half-time person, right? Whether that's an OMA integration specialist or it's a finer visual arts. I want to paint a picture of what access looks like at those 11 locations. I consider us good, at the 2 or more, at the 1.5, at the 1 to 1.5, where I see the majority. Even the 14 schools that have up to a full-time person, based off of these positional allocations, I want to kind of see what access looks like with those 11 schools that only really get that half-time person or sometimes less.
Dr. Trujillo, this is the first time I've seen this chart.
That's all right.
And I would not agree with the chart, but I don't really understand how Ricky took our information. And so, I think there's a little disconnect for me with him.
Okay.
Because in my opinion, we are serving very well the elementary schools with OMA, and a lot of them full-time people. But are you maybe there's just a certain
Maybe it's a question for Ricky in terms of how we, because those to me would be the 11 schools of concern.
Yeah, these are the 11 schools. How many FTE, like in terms of, are there 4 people that are at 0.2 each, for example, or whatever? That may be the case. I'm just saying these 11 schools have less than a total 0.5 FTE funded, from fine arts.
Ricky, can you tell me one of those schools?
Off the top of my head, I don't know off the top of my head, honestly.
So I would say that to me would be the focus, especially if we're presenting to the board and we're talking about schools that are priority and where we want to consider additional allocations. That would probably be the group. I know we've got some board member questions here.
All right, Dr. Shaw.
So on the same topic, I think what the issue is, so the way you're dividing things up, the funded by fine arts department is different than funded by school. So there's how many schools were there? There were about 8 schools. So out of the 11 schools, so I'm looking at the other document that has a spreadsheet with all the FTE allocation.
Right.
So total FTE with OMA, there's a school like Borton that is 0.325, which probably is one of your less than 0.5 in here, but there's an additional 1.0 funded by Magnet or whatever it's coming from. And so there's probably only 3 schools with less than 0.5, because all the other 11 or 8 schools have another 1 or 2 FTE funded by another source.
Yeah. And the magnets, because these are just taking a look at the fine arts, the totally coming from the fine arts department. So I'm not commingling the Borton funded by the magnet money, right? This is what Borton receives from the fine arts department, and only that. Now, it may be a 0.325. I count it as a position. I didn't break this down into FTE because you wanted, kind of warm body count. It would have been, the chart would have been forever essentially if I would have parsed it out into FTE. So I'm trying to lump them into saying like there are 11 schools that have less than a half-time FTE. That may be multiple people though, at these individual sites funded by the fine arts department.
Yeah, and then I see like Johnson is 0.4 FTE, and they're not on the list of schools funded by the school. So that is probably an accurate 0.4.
Correct.
That's probably one of the 3 remaining schools.
Yes.
What's the population of Johnson? Do we know offhand?
It's about less than 300.
Mm-hmm. So one of the smaller,
it's one of our smaller schools. It's a K3, so it's only a primary school.
They have a part-time OMA person, but no band and orchestra because of the grade levels.
Okay.
Dr. Trujillo.
With magnet in the mix, which I missed, and I saw that final slide, yes. So now that we're putting magnet in the mix, I think a true read would be, or the critical question to ask is, what school does not have a either site-funded visual or performance arts person, a district-funded, whether that be OMA or fine arts, or a magnet-funded fine arts? What number of schools are in that position And then what kind of a cost estimate can we put together to remedy that situation? Understanding that we have a slew of schools that are 0.5. That's a separate issue, and that takes, I think you said 4.2 million to equalize them to 1.0. But if the baby step is to look at schools that have absolutely no access right now, not even a part-time person, that to me, and it's looking like 3 when we put the magnets in, that to me is what I would be interested in at least having the board consider for a cost estimate.
Okay.
I mean, that's 70,000 times 3. So it's about, less than $300,000 to do. If we're adding a 1 point FTE, like a 1.0, fine arts to those 3 schools that don't have anything at $70,000 average, which is salary and benefits, is about $210,000 to get those 3.
Dr. Trujillo.
Strategy that, obviously it's for budget season coming up. I think you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that some schools will use existing vacancies and convert them. That's a pretty viable strategy if the board is setting aside a budget capacity already and in its adopted or in its proposed and adopted budget, and we just don't do a revision. You've already set that money aside, and school A doesn't fill 2 positions, and we absorb 1 position back through vacancy savings, but maybe we convert that other position that we've already budgeted for to either equalize its part-time arts person to 1.0 or add if it's a school that doesn't have a full-time. That's just a question. It could have budget ramifications, but it is a viable strategy if we're looking at a way to somehow bring our 0.5 people up to 1.0 and get them at one base location.
Yeah, and I will say, though, that the difficulty that our K-5s and especially our K-8s run into is the fact that we provide them an allocation with the intent that those allocations go for core content areas, and then they're having to figure out how they make that core content work for the number of periods that they have while also providing electives out of those. So yeah, they can do that, and some of them do. It's for a lot of them. I mean, I think of Pueblo Gardens, I think of Maxwell in particular. Those 2 schools, I mean, they're kind of squeezing it through. It would make it easier, for Dr. Conrad and for Clarissa to get an additional FTE than trying to figure out how they make their master schedule work, so that then they can convert one of those FTEs into a fine arts position.
Before I have a question. That's okay, Dr. Shaw. So, Ms. Ashcraft, and I understand my colleague's concern, but my concern is, like you alluded to it earlier, the pool of fine arts teachers. Like if the board comes together and says, okay, Mr. Hernandez, will we approve 210,000? Are we going to be able to find those people? That's my concern.
We are tracking 3 of those people right now. One's at Rincon University with the band department as student teachers who will graduate in December. And we've already been, whining and dining them, so to speak, to join our staff for the 2 open positions that we have, so they would be with us in January. Yes, there are people out there, and we work with all the major universities, and we also recruit some of our people who have retired to come back and work with us too, to fill it in. I think we've done very well with getting some very talented people. And I think, with additional funding, we just have to think smart about how we do this. We work with seniors that are in high school too, if they're interested, if they're the drum major and interested in going into music education and working with the universities to follow those kids through. But yes, it's always a concern.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Dr. Shaw.
Thank you. So back to the allocation things. I wonder why we're so focused on FTE per school as opposed to FTE per student. Like everything else we do, whether it's custodial staff, monitors, assistant principals, other things, is always based on the student count, because we know that an elementary school with 500 students needs more FTE for performing arts and fine arts than a school with 200 students. And so the school with 500 students should have more FTE allocated to that student population than a school with 200 students. So what I'd like to see is more the FTE per student. And yes, we might have some itinerant positions for the smaller schools, and other bigger schools might have their own allocated teachers, but the FTE to the student, I think, would be more relevant than the FTE per the school ratios.
If I may, Dr. Shaw, when I look at scheduling people, I always look at the number of students enrolled in that school. Lineweaver is a good case. We have Karen Fields there full-time, but we also have band and orchestra. We've increased the FTE for band and orchestra to serve all the children, but we also have our OMA design team artists that serve that school as well to cover all the children.
Yeah, and I'll add, like, I think the itinerant position works really well for fine arts because people have different specialties. You know, so my daughter at Balliol, she's both an elective for band and an elective for orchestra. She loves music. That's where she's really focused on. And so she has a different teacher for both of those subject areas because they have different expertise. So having itinerant positions for fine arts, you know, probably works better than itinerant positions for other types of service lines that we do in our district because of the expertise that different fine arts brings. Someone would be better visual arts or musical arts or the band. And to be blunt, I didn't know what difference between band and orchestra before this school year. And there is a big difference between band and orchestra, and I still mess it up, which annoys my daughter to no ends, which is, I love doing that because that's the father's right to annoy their daughters. And so the expertise that they bring and having the itinerantness, going to different schools with that expertise is probably pretty effective to really give students more experiences or more options for more experiences based on what they're interested in.
And that's the beauty of some of these people that are trained three ways: arts integration, band, and orchestra. And we do have some of that.
Michelle.
Thank you. Can you talk about how many teachers are giving our students like performing arts, like as in theater experience?
The performing arts teachers, now I'm just talking the elementary children. The performing arts people are mostly music. Some of them are dance, and a few of them are theater arts. So when we do our professional development training, they cross-train each other. The music person may not be the best theater arts person but they've had experience with musical theater. So they can do a lot, and we see that happening with dance a lot. The performing arts work beautifully together so that we're cross-training them. Now, some of our performing arts people are going to the visual arts trainings to be able to incorporate the visual arts within their lessons as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
All right. Board members, any further questions? All right.
Oh, one more question.
Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. So I know we're just seeing like K through 8 for these specific presentations, but if when you come back, Ricky, if we can have just like a full view of the arts across the district and the high school level too.
Yeah, no, I'll give you the high school.
Okay, thank you. And I know like we're missing some schools, like Dr. Ashcraft, I know we spoke like last year about like those schools that didn't have either a visual or a music teacher, but if we could get it broken down, if you could work with Ricky to compile that presentation so we can really get a full perspective of like what's missing at each school.
Have you seen the charts that we put together that shows each school alphabetically and band, orchestra, who the people that are teaching? Have you seen those charts?
I saw the one that you sent me via email a while back, but not anything recent.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for you to see by school who's doing OMA, who's doing orchestra, violin orchestra, who's doing band, who's doing visual arts. I think that would be helpful.
Is that something we can get emailed?
Yeah, we can. I mean, we have it. I didn't put it as part of this presentation because we were looking at FTE versus, kind of who was what. But yeah, Dr. Ashcraft broke it down very nicely. So yeah.
Okay, that would be great. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now on 8.1, future meeting dates and agenda items. Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah, we're certainly going to be busy. A couple of weeks from now, we're going to have a sizable policy discussion and consideration for policy ECF, which will be making its way to the board for consideration on a second read. The board will be considering the approval for the district to purchase and implement an emergency crisis alert platform. We're looking forward to that demonstration. There will be the annual bond report. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the district's historic victory in the 2023 bond campaign. We want to give a 1-year update for the community. And then we've got new candidates. We're excited. New candidates to bring forward for governing board consideration for both the audit committee. They'll be having a candidate for board consideration, and then we'll have 3 up for consideration to join the budget advisory committee. So we'll certainly be busy in a few weeks.
All right. Board members, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you. I'd like to add to a future agenda a study about offering driver's education classes somewhere in our district, whether it's like during summer school, maybe we can help students like understand the content in, their permits, when you have to take that test. I failed it, I think twice. But also like add in some of the safety elements as much as we can. So I just want us to look into that if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll echo Ms. Shaw because I took driver's ed at Rincon. And I got my license through driver's ed. And I know that was early 90s. And don't look at me for saying something about old because I can see it in your eyes. But I'm just saying, I agree with Ms. Shaw. If that's something, we can maybe look into, and I don't know if there's grant programs out there. I know, we're tight on funding, but that would be helpful. So anything else? Will we go to the order? All right. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.